Welcome to the 100th episode of Killer POV live from Texas Frightmare. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright. I'm with Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria.
Hello! We are sitting on the floor of the Fangoria booth right now in a totally classy way. But this is kind of awesome.
Speaking of classy, the classiest guy I know, according to some leaked video footage that
I used to be. When I had a job, I was classy.
Give him till midnight tonight.
It was an honor to be sitting here
out the wall.
with
Elric
Mistress
Kane.
Bekah.
Oh my God!
Elric
Rob.
Kane is here. Elric Kane.
That's
we
his
need a
Ash as I
nickname.
get a Rob. No, we know nicknames. We're not
No
gonna say it.
nicknames on the show.
No nicknames on the show. 100 episodes.
We
did
actually
it.
met somebody at the Phantasm screening last night that said, "Where's Mistress Bekah?" And we
Oh
saw that. We're like,
my
yes,
God!
Refer to his that.
What
yeah.
the fuck?
That could be worse. And we've got to say a big shout out right now before we start the show. John Holland, who's
Yes.
a longtime listener and helped us a lot last Texas Frightmare. He is on the floor with us right now, live mixing this into his laptop because we could not get all this to work any other way, and he has saved the day.
Yes, he has.
100th episode is due to this person.
Thank
John
you, John.
Holland,
So
you
thank
are
you.
an
To you.
amazing fan, friend. We love you.
So this is going to be fun. We've already been here for a night. The convention hasn't started yet. It's about to start. And we've already seen a lot of crazy stuff. It's already looking like it's going to be a lot of fun, bigger than last year.
Yeah.
Should we just start? Why don't we kick off with what we did last night?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
let's do it.
Well, so we went to Phantasm anniversary screening with pretty much most of the cast in attendance.
Yep. And Don Coscarelli.
You guys, that was at the Alamo.
At the Alamo. in
Alamo Draft
Dallas.
House.
Tall Man even made it.
Yeah. Angus Scrimm.
And here, the twist was this. I thought it was just the last 35 millimeter screening.
Which you've been dying
I was
to see.
dying to see this movie again. It's been about 15 years since I saw it, but I've always loved it and kind of purposely waited till I could see either a Blu-ray or on screen. So I'm all excited. I buy the tickets early, 35 millimeter. I bought Rob's. I'm like, Rob, we're gonna... And then just on the way there, we're told by our chauffeur, who also happens to be recording the show.
He's
John,
awesome.
that he's pretty sure it's a live commentary with the 35 millimeter. And so I was a little soured.
Elric, you almost lost your mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Elric, that sounds like something.
The idea of
people talking.
through a movie that I really wanted to see again, but I gotta say I was won over.
Yeah, it was great.
Really?
You know, it was a really interesting because the movie's so visual anyway, and you could still hear the dialogue on screen. And it was, and Don led by saying this is gonna be a terrible print.
Right.
It's vinegar syndrome, blah blah blah, and he said that's why they wanted to do the live commentary was to supplement a crappy print. It's his print. Now that wasn't entirely true. The print was actually pretty good.
The print was great. I
Yeah.
think he
Did he
sold-
renege later?
No, really.
No. I mean, there was a lot of hiss to it.
A lot of sound, yeah, probably, yeah.
But visually, it looked really good. But he set it up in a way that we were expecting much worse.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the commentary, I mean, it was a lot of fun because obviously it was very loose and they were all together for probably the first time they've all done a commentary together for this movie. And I don't want to say they didn't talk through the whole movie. It was pretty sporadic. Like they let certain scenes play out. So it was a lot of fun. It was an interesting, interactive way to see the movie. And, I really loved it. But, I mean, the highlight has to be that we got an extended preview of Phantasm 5 Ravager.
First audience in the world
to ever see
see this footage of Ravager.
Yeah, and it was great. It's I guess you could refer to it as like a trailer, an extended trailer, because it started with a fairly long scene. Like, just it kind of gave the mood and atmosphere of the movie. We got to see a fully completed scene. And then right at the end, it kind of just, went into a bunch of quick clips the way a trailer would.
Because they're still working on a lot of the effects.
Yeah.
And that's the main delay will just be it's an independent project, and they've got a lot of effects to render.
Yeah.
But Don was pushed. He was pushed by a question to say, will it come out this year? And by the end, he said, yes.
Yeah.
So fingers
2015.
crossed, it will be a 2015.
Sometime in 2015.
But it looked really cool. I mean, it looked like if you're a fan of Phantasm, it looked like you're going to be satisfied. That's what it looked like.
And it was fun because the Lady in Lavender was in the scene we saw, so it's like they got everybody from the original back pretty much
Nice.
to do something in it. So very cool stuff.
It was fun, and I still loved the movie. It was really fun just to see how. One thing I would say about it is Michael Baldwin's performance as a child. It almost took somebody saying that, and it took Don in the commentary to be like, I saw all these kid actors, and none of them had your subtlety. So and you're just a really terrific actor, very mature for like a 13-year-old. And I started watching the movie with that.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I was like, that's one of the best because in every situation he doesn't go over the top. He's just in the moment.
Yeah, I don't think I appreciated it as much until Don pointed
And
out.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's what was
Exactly.
cool.
Oh, look what he's doing here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he is really good.
Yeah, and also the other thing they pointed out is like he's, as soon as something weird happens, this character goes up to his bedroom, puts a knife in his sock, and he's ready to take the shit on. He's not the typical like, oh, I'm going to be in denial, or it's not real or any of this. It's just like, nope, let's if something's coming, let's take it on. I really like that.
I kind of love how quick on board Reggie is too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
great, yeah.
Reggie's like ready for action immediately.
He's like, hey guys, what's going on? And then like a bug comes out and he's like, all right, what are we doing?
Yeah. How do we kill it? Well, and then there's a little addendum. So Reggie did not make it to the live Q&A. Everyone except Reggie, and afterwards they said that he missed his flight.
Yeah.
So hopefully he'll make it by tomorrow's
apparently
panel.
he will be. Yeah.
He'll be here today.
Word is.
Excellent.
But that was really fun, and they had a couple other screens, Spider Baby and Scream, that we haven't been able to make. But
Scream was the one before ours.
Yeah.
Which, was kind of cool. But
great crowd though. Great, terrific turnout.
Yeah.
Passionate. Sure. It's great place to show movies.
Yeah.
Nice.
Elric wanted to kick off by talking about films we've seen.
Yeah, because we've been off for a while.
We've had a couple of weeks now.
And also we were on, if you're looking for a little break, we were on Now Streaming Podcast, friend of ours, non-horror stuff, but it was fun. But it's hard when we go for a couple weeks because there's a lot to catch up on,
Yeah.
What about you guys? You want to start, Bekah?
Sure. I saw a couple of things. Well, I went to the Midnight Sleepwalkers screening.
Oh, yeah.
With Mick Garris and Madchen, and just a lot of the cast and crew was there. And I wasn't too sure what to expect because I had not seen that movie since it first came out. Like, it was the 90s when I saw it last time. And I remembered the transformation scene being really badass, but I couldn't remember much else about it. And I will say that the creatures kind of just look like, people running around in rubber suits at this point. But it's
I
still,
love them.
Yeah, it's still, and I don't remember it being funny. But it was like it was very kind of smart ass dark comedy. At least like the graveyard scene had like a weird comedic tone to it that I definitely didn't catch the first time I saw it.
Did you catch all the cameos?
Yeah, there was. The graveyard scene was just so cool.
Toby, Clive,
and Stephen King.
Stephen King, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and Mick even said, you know what, that scene easily could be the first one you could delete.
Of course.
But it's so cool.
It's
to
wonderful.
See them all
Just and they're arguing, so it looks really fun. Where Stephen King's trying to find something, and the other ones are like, I don't know, go ask Joe. And it plays out wonderfully.
Yeah. Hands down, my favorite Mick Garris film.
Yeah,
and it's just a fun because I forgot that it took place. It's in the 50s, right? Or
no,
it's
modern.
80s.
It's definitely modern day.
It
totally
flavor.
does. Yeah, well, and that's what a lot of Stephen King stuff goes back to that.
I love that.
Yeah. No, it definitely does feel other timely. I think that maybe
it's because of his car, because he's driving a classic car. But I think it is set in
maybe their
contemporary
relationship
times,
is also meant to feel.
It's very
it's
1950s.
incestual, and it feels like the mother-son relationship is from a different era.
Yeah.
And plus the soundtrack. I mean, they definitely have. I think they have like an extreme song in it. It's like Nuno Bettencourt plays for a bit, but they also have that very classic kind of sleepwalking song.
They use that track.
Right.
That's
so
cool.
yeah.
Speaking of that, just because this ties in, Sleepwalkers, a whole incestuous theme. Really quick, I did a double bill with two of my friends, Chelsea and Amy. They wanted to see Psycho 4, also directed by Mick Garris, also a very incestuous relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
He talked about that. He was like, "Yeah, I just come off Psycho 4." I forget which one was before the other one. So,
but also he got Olivia Hussey and who's the one in Sleepwalkers? Alice Krige.
Yeah, Krige. Oh yeah,
they're both at their absolute hottest
amazing
in both those films.
Because Alice Krige is equal parts scary and kind of menacing as she is sexy. She just has a weird.
She's
presence.
also got this wonderful soft demeanor.
Yeah.
And as the Borg Queen, she's amazing. In Star Trek Generations, I think.
Yeah,
It's just like holy shit.
I think the first Silent Hill as well.
Yeah, she is.
But I've talked about Psycho 4 before, so I just wanted to bridge that gap. But also, I hadn't revisited Bates Motel, the old TV pilot with Bud Cort and Lori Petty in years because I've never. I've
never even seen it.
The challenge for the screening to my friends was like, well, let's see how long we could last because it's an awful pilot. But this was the first time I actually kind of enjoyed it.
Wow.
And I think because there's been a lot of space and time, and now there's the new Bates Motel TV show and all that. It just seems like a weird, almost like a weird Amazing Stories episode that just happens to take place at the Bates Motel.
So that was meant to be a TV show?
It's a feature length pilot.
No,
what year is it from?
It's after Psycho 3, but before Psycho 4.
Oh wow!
So we're talking
that was like
about
90s.
88.
Oh, before
around
that.
there in that realm. Because Psycho 3 didn't do well financially at the box office, so they were trying to do this pilot, and they didn't include Anthony Perkins. They just it kind of continues from the first one, and they just kill like Norman Bates dies and leaves everything to Bud Cort. And it's so bizarre.
And his character is actual Harold from Harold and Maude, which would be
much,
perfect, right?
He's really nerdy, and then he's got Lori Petty is like the tough girl or whatever, and then Jason Bateman pops up, and Greg Henry. Like, there's so many like recognizable names that it's
Greg
pretty
Henry's
neat.
been coming up a lot lately.
I know, yeah.
Always
So I
looking
don't
for
know.
his
I
name.
mean, it's available on DVD as one of those like Universal Vault series where they, it's a DVD-R. But it's kind of fun. It's interesting to visit it now. It might be on YouTube. You didn't hear that from me, though.
Gotta check it out.
Yeah.
Very cool.
What else did you see, Bekah?
So I tried to watch Night Watch because Rob had
Tried.
talked about it. I say tried. Rob had talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the show.
Not the
And-
Russian one.
Not the Russian one. This is the American remake
Of a
with
Danish film?
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's
I
got
think so.
A
Ewan
good Danish
McGregor, and it's got
Patricia
John
Arquette.
C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette,
Nolte.
Josh Brolin, Nick Nolte.
Nolte.
So it's just like this all-star cast. It was awful.
Yeah.
It's streaming on Netflix right now, and what's weird is it did not have that bad of ratings on Netflix. Because usually that's what I go by is if it's
It's
got,
possible
like,
the ratings
two
were for the original. You never
I
know.
don't
It could
know.
I
be.
didn't even realize, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
'cause
possible.
usually if something has like 2 stars on Netflix, I won't watch it. But it popped up in my, recommended for Rebekah
Yeah.
queue, and I think it has like 3.5. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And it was painful.
The original's great, and Anchor Bay put out a DVD of the original Danish one, and it's fantastic. And then I remember this was one of our trivia questions at one point because I remember seeing that trailer to the remake like before every movie 100 times.
Trailer
and then
looks
it just,
good.
It just never came out.
Yeah.
Like it was just one day I went to the video store and it was on the video shelves,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, how did that happen? And then I tried watching it, and it's like it's one of Ewan McGregor's first American roles, and he cannot for the life
His
of himself
accent
hold
fades.
an American accent. Like he didn't quite master it yet.
I hate
So-
it when they try. I honestly think it would be a better performance if you just let them do their voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely.
Who cares, you know?
If he sounds Scottish, who gives a shit?
And it's like it doesn't even know what it wants to be because you find out it's a serial killer from the beginning, but then he's working in this morgue and you think the morgue might be haunted, but then Josh Brolin's like going crazy and beating up people in bars, so then you start to think that he's killing people, and it's really just kind of all over the place. And then it's got this old man who runs the morgue and is pretty much just like a gravedigger caricature, and it's just bizarre. So then next up,
It's Robert Ressler.
That's
Yeah,
right.
from Nightmare on Elm Street
Just so you know,
And
we've been
sometimes
getting
they come back.
salutes and kisses
Yeah.
by Robert
He's also
Ressler
in
throughout.
Dave Parker's segment.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's wonderful. That's why I blew him a kiss.
Maybe we'll try to. bring
Anyway,
it
that's
up.
why we're.
edit that
Oh, and
out.
here
It's
comes
very hard
here
to.
comes special guest.
And here comes special
He's
guest
extraordinaire.
not, he's not
Bowen.
on this part.
We should
AJ
edit that
Bowen.
part out probably where we're discussing people.
Okay, let's keep
But
going.
anyway, so the last thing I saw this week was House of Wax, the remake, which I knew I had enjoyed, but I couldn't remember why I liked it. And so I rewatched it, and it was phenomenal. And I remembered why I like it. It's just a fucking fun movie with really good effects. AJ
I've never
is
been
sitting
teabagged.
on
Yes, I've
I've
David.
never been actively teabagged while I've heard about House of
Yeah,
Wax.
just glad
AJ
he's
is
doing it
sitting
to
on
you for
Elric's
once.
neck.
But now that I
So,
have, I don't want to go back.
and that kind of sums me up. I liked the House of Wax remake. It was really fun, really cool effects, especially when the entire house is melting at the end. I was just so amazed by how they did some
That
of
was
that.
one of the first remakes I really enjoyed during that period.
Yeah,
I just remember the promotional T-shirts were "See Paris Hilton Die." Like
I
that,
know.
that was on the shirt.
I think she was like
there.
she was their marketing tool, but it was really a cool movie otherwise. So
Yeah.
I noticed a little word on your paper that you didn't read out just then.
I didn't.
I've got good news, guys. We won the Rondos.
Not.
Nah,
didn't.
we
No,
came
that's-
close. We were second place.
We came second. We don't know who beat us, but it wasn't Tales from
His
the
name-
Beyond the
it
Pale
was-
who deserved to beat us.
Yes.
If anyone should have beaten us, it should have been them.
Yeah.
I don't know who did beat us. If
It
you're
was
out there listening,
Monster Kid Radio,
Monster Kid Radio.
which I don't know much about,
I'm
but
sure we
apparently
would love your show.
it's very classic monsters. So I mean, it fits well with the
But we
Rondo
came
Awards.
third last year. We came second this year, and that means if we
Next
can last
year-
one more year, we will probably not even get nominated.
If.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
All right, really quick, I'm just going to throw out a few titles that I saw. Elric, maybe you want to chime in on this. We saw They Live as a Secret 16.
Yeah, my
Check it out.
birthday. My
Oh,
birthday
yeah.
That was your
screening,
birthday
16
screening?
millimeter. I will tell you what I think about them. I actually have very, very specific thoughts about that. I'd never thought about that film. When we were watching the first half of it, it is a totally different. Anyone who's a film school type, Vittorio De Sica made like Italian neorealist film. That first half of that movie is straight out of like it's just Italian neorealist Los Angeles, like poor people struggling to get jobs, walking around.
It's
Nothing
the bicycle
happens.
thief with
It really
like
is.
Los Angeles
for
homeless
the first like
population.
45
Yeah.
minutes until they put on the glasses, and then it becomes a surreal sci-fi fun, super fun movie. But up until that point, it's really restrained for
Yeah.
and for Carpenter, I think it's actually a pretty mature kind of statement at the start, and then it just becomes batshit fun. But it held up, I thought.
Yeah,
You know.
No, I had a great time with it. And that's the thing. I almost appreciate it in a slightly different perspective every time I see it,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's such a a wonderfully put together movie.
It's really grown with me too, where I notice new things about the social contexts of the film, depending on how old I am, that I didn't catch when I was like 14 watching it.
I mean, it's a giant fuck you to Reagan. I mean, it's pretty on the nose. It is not subtle when it comes to what it's taking aim at, and that's why Carpenter's so fun. You know, because if you can make that fun, it's very hard to make that fun.
Yeah.
To be political satire is hard to make that fun and not make a point. And I think that film does a little bit of both.
Yeah. I also saw a double bill of Darkman and Army of Darkness at the New Beverly.
Oh, excellent.
Which was a lot of fun. I took Scott Reynolds' kid Zane, who's 14, so it was fun to revisit both of those movies, which now in retrospect, seeing them together, it's kind of Raimi really unleashed and at the top of his game. Like, you could see you watch, especially Darkman, you could see so much of Spider-Man in it. Like, he was just ready to do that superhero subgenre and all those tricks. But both of those are really fun movies to see again. And
So wait, you went with a 14-year-old. What did he think?
Oh, he loved it. I mean, he'd already seen Army of Darkness, but he'd never saw Darkman. And he's big into effects. Like, he wants to be an effects artist, practical effects artist. So he just loved the way Darkman looked. So we had a lot of fun with those. And if you haven't seen them in a while, it's also, I kind of also think it's that era where Bruce Campbell was at his best.
Oh yeah.
Because he looks his best.
He looks really handsome. He's
doing the best work
funny.
he can.
His timing's great. Yeah.
You know and it was fun that they ended with Darkman because obviously he pops up as a cameo.
Did you see that photo of how trim he looks for? Because a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's all these years later that he's about to go back and play Ash. I saw these photos. It looked like he had dropped like 50 pounds from the time I saw him.
He dyed his hair black again.
Yeah. He looked really different. I mean, he must have literally trained to go back into this role because last time we saw him at the awards, whatever that was in Hollywood, at Universal last year. He was there.
That would be the Igors.
We saw him at the Igors, and he looked kind of like he does on that TV show. He's a little hefty, and he looks like a 50-year-old guy.
Yeah,
he really looked like he had maybe
I can't wait. That's cool.
So it's cool that he's taking it so seriously. I'm excited about that.
Right, and the last thing I want to talk about really quick is Harbinger Down.
You had to go to the premiere of that.
Yeah, it was the this is Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr., who are ADI, and they had kickstarted this idea to do an all practical. Old school 80s style, creature feature.
And Lance talked a lot about it on the show.
When Lance was on our show, because Lance Hendrickson is the lead. And it wasn't, yes, it was a premiere, but I think it was more intended for their investors and supporters and Kickstarter people. They rented out the Egyptian to show it for the first time complete. And I got to go with my friend Josh Cortez, who's also a talented screenwriter and effects artist. And it was really good. I mean, in terms of what they were going for, they were trying to make like a modern version of The Thing. And it's pretty much in line with that. I really liked it a lot. The effects were really, really cool. I mean, that's what you're expecting for something like that. The only thing that's weird about it is that the practical effects you kind of see them so fast on screen. Not every shot. There's certain shots where you get to appreciate it, but a lot of the times and I think it was edited that way to kind of try to get a scare out of you. You know what I mean? Like an Alien, which seems to be one of their biggest influences. You see the alien in the shaft for 2 seconds and then it's cut out.
Yeah.
So it's almost hard to see the practical effects. And also they definitely are they're the types of artists that don't mind CG in terms of enhancements. So there were a few bits where it was kind of hard to tell if it was all practical or a little bit of CG help. So in terms of the goal of saying it's all practical, it's kind of hard to tell that or appreciate it, but it was still a lot of fun and a really good movie. For people like us, we're seasoned and we've seen everything. So it's not like anything groundbreaking in terms of like, I've never seen anything like that before. It's pretty in line with like The Thing. And we haven't seen that in a long time. So, something like that is kind of cool to see again.
They were doing the Thing remake or prequel. I don't even know what it is. The prequel remake-y thing. They were doing all the effects on it, and they had done some amazing stuff. And then the studio kind of pushed to do more digital, so a lot of their physical stuff got canned and ended up in the Universal Maze for the Thing at Halloween time. So I think that's kind of what pushed them. That was one of their biggest, I think, kind of turning points when they were like, let's do this.
Because they put all that footage on YouTube of them testing it all out, and it got such a huge response. I can guarantee you this was a response to all their work from The Thing, not making it on screen. It's like, it's going to work if we did it, so they did it. And, it did work. And I will say this, Lance is great in the movie. I mean, Lance is always good in everything he does, but I wish I could remember the line, but it's been a while and I already forgot it. But like his first line when he comes on camera is so badass that you're like, that's how Lance should enter a movie.
That's the thing I like about Lance, talking to Joe, the guy, Joe Madry, our friend who wrote his biography, is that I was asking him, because some of these actors now are doing 10 to 20 maybe more roles a year, and not for big films, for little film. And you see some of them, and they do feel phoned in. Some performances are phoned in. Some. And I asked him about Lance. He said, "Man, the thing about Lance is he doesn't care what gig he gets. He goes 200% because he said if he doesn't, he just can't even get out of bed.
Yeah,
like he can't face the music. And I love that. I think that keeps you inspired. Like there was one called In the Blood, and I think it was last year. And I remember watching it. Joe had given me a copy, and I didn't love the film. It was pretty, but the performance was one of his best performances. It was so intense and real. And you're like, what a shame, because no one's ever going to see the film. You know what I mean? It's interesting.
But no, it's admirable that he gives
it
every
really
time.
is. I think that's important.
So that was pretty much it for me. Elric, anything on your end?
So some interesting stuff. The first one is one that's been getting critically, lambasted, and I think a lot of it is because of the guy who made its name, and that's Lost River, directed by Ryan Gosling. And it is not a great film in terms of narrative and in terms of like being a thrilling film, but it is a fascinating film. It's like dreamy, broken Detroit landscapes. It's a film made by an actor who did not star in it, so he's got points with me that he didn't put himself in it. He wanted to direct a movie. His influences played too close to the surface a little bit, and that's been the main criticism. But I don't care because his influences are fucking awesome. Seriously, like Barbara Steele has a cameo as a grandmother, and they have one of the most beautiful images put on screen this year of her face and fire behind it, and it's a haunting visual film. And I genuinely believe that if it had been by a French director or something else, it probably would have played every festival and been like a semi-hit. It's missing like one thing. It's rare that you see a film where you're like, oh, that's beautiful, and each scene independently works really well on its own. But the connective tissue between each scene somehow isn't there. And I think this is probably a screenwriting thing on his part, being a first-time writer. And because of that, there's really no tension, and yet it's a film that could have... There's a character in it, the guy who steals the show, and I wasn't a Doctor Who watcher, so Matt Smith is the actor's name.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
Okay, so I'd seen him in nothing. Didn't even know who he was. Shaved head, shirtless, driving on a king's throne on the back of a car, and it just drives around Detroit, and he's called Bully, and he wants to run. It's almost like post-apocalyptic Mad Max in Detroit. I would watch a whole movie with that character going around, and he was so intimidating, and his timing and everything about it was so interesting that he stole the whole movie.
Nice.
And unfortunately, the only miscast, in my opinion, Christina Hendricks from Mad Men, who's wonderful to look at.
She plays the mom, right?
She plays the mom, and she's I think way too young to play the mom to this 20-year-old kid. It just, that one thing kept me out a bit. But everyone in it, Saoirse Ronan is the other one it was an actress I haven't really noticed too much. She was in Hannah, which was an interesting film. She is just stunning, and it just blew me away. Her presence on screen. I honestly think if you listen to the show and you tend to be interested in the more arty type films that have been mentioned throughout, absolutely rent this movie. It is not a 40% Rotten Tomato. It's more like a 75%, but it's not quite great because it's just missing this one
And this
thing.
is his first movie.
This is his first film, and his
for a
influences are
director,
literally riffing and Bava. I mean, they're his on the fucking surface. Bava is a major influence, and Nicholas Winding Refn, the same mistakes Refn's films often make, he makes.
It's such a shame because I think that I did what a lot of other people had done is I heard about it, and then at the Sleepwalkers screening, John Gallagher was talking about how it was like his favorite film of the year thus far.
Yeah, it's some people really do.
He was talking about it with a whole group, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's supposed to suck. It's supposed to suck." And then I went home and looked at the reviews on Amazon, and they're not good.
No,
then I was like, "Well, I'll hold on this one until later."
Like things like I don't want to say Terrence Malick because it's not arty for arty's sake. I think it is arty for dread and arty for creating a mood. But like I said, there's an issue of those individual scenes don't come together to make you go, oh, I care what happens next. But I think he wants you to. It's close though, man. I think I honestly would put it as one of my most interesting movies of the year so far. And the one thing he cheated with as a first-time director, even though it's exactly what you should do, is he got, in my opinion, the best DP in the world right now to shoot it. So all these great images, it's hard for me to go Ryan Gosling's completely responsible because I'm like, Benoit Debby shoots all of Gaspar Noé's films. He shot Spring Breakers for Harmony Korine. I mean, he's an amazing DP, and so these images are really haunting it. But I wish I'd seen it on a screen because I might have just loved it on a screen. It was a random VOD. A film I've been trying to track down for a long time, and it held up, Baby Blood. It's the 90s French film.
I love this
movie.
movie.
It is phenomenally fun.
It's got like a brain damage-esque character, like the Elmer character.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's so
you
snarky.
never see it though.
Yeah,
so
it talks to her.
Basically, a little worm thing from a circus at the start, gets into this like very attractive, kind of deranged young French lady, and it kind of just crawls into her uterus
during a rape.
It crawls into her uterus and impregnates her, and but it communicates to her. So you hear it talk in voiceover for the whole movie as she basically kills men. It's got it's basically the Brood mixed with a Helen Lauder feel, because it's kind of a serious tone. And but it's bizarre. It's like, she'll have a conversation with her. My favorite line was, what's your plan? Like, she's talking to this thing that hasn't come out yet. I will come out, and eventually I will take over your world. Yeah, and she's like, when? And he's like, in 4.5 billion years. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not an imminent threat.
No, wait, did you watch it in the subtitles, or did you watch?
I watched it in subtitles.
Okay, now see, this I will say, this is the one film I highly recommend watching the American dub.
Oh, really?
Because the voice of the creature in the American dub is Gary fucking Oldman. It's amazing.
Really?
Yeah, I have the American dub version, and he is so snarky with it. Like, it takes on a whole new level.
How weird. That's a weird.
If you watch it with the subtitles, it sounds very robotic. The alien creature.
Yeah, he has like a synthy voice. But I liked it. I mean, it was otherworldly, which I liked. I think Gary Oldman I might find too fun.
He's almost soothing, but it's kind of like he's trying to sell her, where he's like, I'm going to come out and take over your world. And it's very kind of soothing and snarky at the same time. You got to check it out with Gary Oldman.
Yeah, its director is Alan Roebuck, and this is very much in line with Cronenbergian body horror. If you're into body horror, this film is, and it's on Netflix. It's a film I stumbled upon a trailer thinking this is going to be impossible to find. I was really bummed, and then it was just on Netflix. So I rented that. It's really cool.
It's been on my queue for so
long. I have the
too.
DVD of it as well, which wasn't
DVD,
that hard to hunt down.
Yeah, no, well worth seeing.
Yeah.
I finally saw, even after I've been throwing out sequel ideas since we started the show, I finally saw Purge Anarchy. My feeling was the first half of it was awesome, and I was like fully entertained. I was like, this is what I wanted a Purge film to be.
The guy in the truck. He was wonderful.
There was a lot of Frank Grillo is just awesome. I had a lot of fun with the first half, and then in the second half, I think it just kind of fell into like, and then a weird dinner party where that point where I don't buy that humans are quite that ugly. I think some subsections of humans, yes, are ugly and bad things happen, but when it gets to the point where everyone would be in on it, I don't buy it, because I know that in our room, none of the four of us are going to go out and do Purge Day, right?
Oh, Purge, right here at the Fango booth. Let's go, guys. We're purging.
Even though Bekah's the Salo of people, she might fist you. She's not going to...
I will fist you.
She might fist you, but she won't cut your throat. That's my feeling about Bekah. Am I right?
2 o'clock.
I'm looking at her husband as I said that.
Oh, God.
He said just the tip, so that was weird.
2 o'clock. Enough, boys. 2 o'clock on Saturday. Let's go Purge at the Fango booth. We'll set a time.
I think the Purge is still, in terms of conceptually, I still think it's one of the most interesting ideas for horror films, and I really hope they keep making a couple to keep exploring new things.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing about it I'm interested in, is just the idea itself.
There'll be a third.
Yeah, and it did well for them.
It's already in the works.
But I thought the first half was legitimately entertaining and what I wanted from a sequel. The first one was just a little too closed off for what the idea, I thought. Right. And then the last thing I'm going to mention, it is relevant because the guests are going to be at this convention. Boxing Helena guests are going to be here. Julian Sands.
How did you make
Sherilyn
it through
Fenn,
that movie?
Jennifer Lynch directed it. This movie, I called Rob straight away. I was like, holy cow, dude. We need to talk about Boxing Helena. I said to Rob, what did I say, Rob? I said, you have got to not watch this. And when you've got to not watch this, write never and never, never, I should break the disc.
You were like, if you're ever thinking about revisiting it.
No one loves Boxing Helena.
But the thing about it, obviously it's been a very controversial film when it came out. She was the first woman director for Hollywood. I think there's a stat like she was the first woman to sell a certain script at a certain level. It was a big deal. But then obviously the lead, Kim Basinger, dropped out and was willing to go bankrupt over dropping out of that movie rather than perform in this movie because of the nudity and some of the stuff required. And Sherilyn Fenn's fine. And there's just something about the tone of this movie that it's not crazy enough to get that WTF laugh. It's actually kind of a chore to watch. And I found it really, in the crowd, who knows? Like in the crowd, there's certain parts, and Bill Paxton's, everyone's really kind of bad. Julian Sands is a really great actor in Warlock. Love him in Warlock. In this movie, it's really bad. And a lot of stuff is bad. And so I feel bad because it's like, and I know there's probably a lot of stories. And one of the reasons I feel comfortable saying that I think it's really terrible is that I think, personally, and hopefully we'll have her on the show, that Jennifer Lynch has come on in leaps and bounds since directing that. I think she's probably 20 or something, or 25 when she made it. And I think Surveillance is really interesting. And I think her Walking Dead episode was the best of the year.
Yeah.
So
I
I
like
think that's.
Chained. She did a movie called Chained.
Yeah, and I haven't
thought it
seen
was
that one,
pretty
and I
decent.
heard that was good. So I think, I don't care how you start. It's where you go to. And so, but for me, watching that, I was really hopeful that some of those like Lynchian moments that from David Lynch, there'll be a slow-mo of a bird or something. And watching in this movie, it's just flat, and it just has nothing. There's no like other layer. And it commits the biggest cardinal sin in cinema, which is the entire movie is a fucking dream. And I'm going to spoil that if you haven't seen it on purpose to stop you from making the mistake of watching something that ends up being a dream. But yeah, again, if it was playing on your local multiplex at a retro screening, it's probably worthwhile. But at home, it really was not. It was bad. But when we have Cheryl and Fan, Julian, and Jennifer on the show, I will tell them that movie is awesome. I'm an asshole. No, I won't do that. But Dave, Bekah's husband, who's staring at the back of my head, and he's saying he loved that movie. So. I guess I don't.
No one loves that movie.
Yeah, it's actually true. Somebody must, because there's a convention where they're going to be talking about it.
They're all going to be here, yeah.
And we're here right now. So, I have one question about this convention. Is there anyone here who you've been like in the back of your mind go, oh my God, I'm really curious to meet that person. I've never, because you've done a million conventions, so it must get harder to impress you, Rob.
Yeah.
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 So no.
No, not for me. No. Okay. Again, I've been going since I've been 15 years old. Yeah. So everybody I've ever wanted to meet, I've met. I'm more interested in things like the Phantasm event we went to last night, where let's see something kind of fun and unique and interactive.
Do a spin on things.
I'm really excited to do Dead Right Hard Trivia here.
Yeah,
we're doing that tonight at 9. It's going to be awesome.
That's the story. I want to be more interactive with other fellow fans that come to this stuff.
I'll tell you, I do have a couple. The Shining twins is just fascinating to me.
It'd be interesting to meet them.
No, I know that if we could get them in here even for 5 minutes just to hear about, because their scenes are shot more like photos, right? Yeah. Because they don't have to. So I'd love to just know, because Kubrick insights are always great. And the biggest one for me is, huge Elvira fan. Elvira's definitely one of the reasons
right across from us this entire weekend.
I got into horror because she's ridiculous sexy, and she came on TV when you could watch other things, and there she was. But I've met Cassandra, done interview shows with Cassandra twice, never met Elvira. And so to me, like seeing her in costume as Elvira, I've never seen it. Yeah. I'm very excited about that prospect.
She looks fantastic as Elvira, let me tell you. Still to this day.
I'm excited.
Kids, oh my God.
You could pull her off.
Just go find Alexander Breckenridge and get over yourself.
Oh, yeah, well, she's here too.
I didn't realize she was going to be right across from us, so now I'm nervous.
Now we're going to be staring. I'm excited because it means all of that line is going to be going past the Fango booth the whole time. So
AJ's
it's
gone?
good for sales.
Oh, AJ was around, but he's gone.
Yeah.
We can tell you right now, we will have a great guest on our big show. We don't know who it is yet.
We'll
and that's
figure
tomorrow.
Somebody out.
We're going to hopefully grab some soundbitey little interviews like we did last year.
You mean in 5 minutes from now?
Well, our show's not a 5 minutes.
Yeah. We don't know who's coming up next, but they are awesome.
Yeah, you just have
and
no
man,
awesome.
we're on cue with it. Yeah.
But this is the 100th. Keep tuned.
Yep. Boom. By the way, before we start, that's John Holland who's doing the recording for us. He's actually a fan and friend and listener of the show that we met for the first time at Texas Frightmare last year. So the moral is that could be you next year.
If you play your cards right, you could run our tech.
You can do free shit for us. If you're lucky.
Okay, so welcome to Killer POV episode number 100. Here we are.
Wow.
Holy smokes.
There you go.
Wow.
We've only done one live one before, and it was at Texas Frightmare last year, and we had a great time. For any of you that are, I recognize a lot of people, and you all talk to us, so I know most of you sort of know what our show is, but if you don't, we're a weekly horror talk show that's on Geek Nation, and it's hosted by myself, Rob Galluzzo. I was with FearNet and Icons of Fright, Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria, and Elric Kane from Inside Horror, and he owns a fine establishment in Los Angeles called the Jump Cut Cafe.
We hope I still own it. By the way, a couple days should have burned down.
Elric Kane coffee shop.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this show for a while, and we've had a lot of amazing guests, just based primarily because we're in Los Angeles, and we're able to bump into a lot of people. I mean, a lot of these guests go to Elric's Cafe because they live kind of in the area. So it's always been fun to make it interactive. And for this one, we wanted to bring a really good friend of ours and an actor that we respect a lot.
But he was unavailable.
So we got AJ.
Yeah, no, Pat Healy was not available.
He's not there.
So,
he's on the shirt over there. He's on the shirt.
No, but seriously, and I'm not just saying this because he's sitting next to me, but The Sacrament, The House of the Devil, Horrible Way to Die is a great one if you haven't seen it. The Signal.
Creepshow 3.
Creepshow 3, the season. Let's get really...
Creepshow 3 is an underrated movie.
Welcome AJ Bowen to the show with us again. And, Elric, what else do we have in store?
You know what? Okay, so for our 100th, we want to do something big, and everything's bigger in Texas, as they say. And there's a lot of really amazing guests here who are signing autographs as we speak. I wanted to do something different, and just as I walked in that door, and that's how cool these guys are at rolling with stuff, I said, let's do our biggest thing yet. It's the 100th episode. I want an extra guest to be one of our fans. And Aaron Dries, please come up, sir. This is a guy.
We met him yesterday.
Here's the story. Explain Aaron's story.
We met Aaron, a couple of weeks ago. I saw a post from an Australian in Melbourne or Sydney.
Yeah, come on in. I live in the middle of nowhere, so I'm from literally nowhere.
So an Australian, Australia's from the middle of nowhere. I'm from New Zealand, so it took a lot for me to even invite him. And he posted that he was coming all the way to America and that he wanted to go see Jump Cut, the cafe I have. He wanted to come to Texas Frightmare and meet us and go to other. He's doing a few other things, and he's a writer in his own right, a novelist. And we met him, and we talked about horror yesterday, and we were like, this is no different than what our show does, which is create a conversation with people who are just passionate about movies, And so he was just such a sharp guy that we're like, there's no bigger person we could have on than one of the fans and a legit dude. So, Aaron, thanks, dude.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming up.
I'm very happy to be here. It's awesome.
And I'm not going to actually let him use my mic ever, so I might actually have to hold this one. But
we can fight. Yeah.
You guys can knock it back.
So, Bekah, what are we talking about? Because we're kind of winging this.
Yeah, so what we were going to do today is we're going to do a couple of kind of controversial topics in the film industry. Controversial. So things that, because what we do on the show is we mostly just like to generate a discussion about the horror industry. I mean, we obviously all come from kind of different backgrounds in the industry. And a lot of times what we do on the show is interview people, but we wanted for our 100th to just be kind of things that we're passionate about and kind of discussions on what makes it important to us, where we see the industry going, what some of the current controversies and discussions are that are happening in horror. And then we were also at the end going to open it up to questions from our fans. So as we're going through, we'd be thinking of questions that you guys would like to ask on air, so you guys can all be part of the 100th episode as well.
And this guy can ask anytime, so you can just pop in.
You're part of it.
Oh, I'm just going to literally just wrestle the microphone off you.
You're going to have to. It's Elric. So,
There will be blood. There will be blood.
Back off, Fuzzy. Yeah. All right.
So we actually have a whole bunch of topics, and we're going to narrow it down to 2, which we probably should have done ahead of time.
2?
Just start.
Start. So I think that the first one we were going to do was the plight of the indie industry. Kind of the plight of the indie
You framed that with the word plight. Now we've already.
I know. It's already like a thing
That's
beforehand.
Well, how would you want to tackle this? Because the thing is, I mean, look, a lot of the films that we see every year, at the end of the year, everyone does their kind of top 10 horror list or whatever it is. And most of the time, it's kind of like the little indie movies that end up being the ones that stand out. And when you go back in time and think about it, it's like Halloween was an independent movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was an independent. All the greatest horror movies of all time were pretty much little indies that could. So I don't know if there could be another Halloween in today's day and age, or a Chainsaw in terms of like that was a movie that opened small and then kept going from town to town and kind of opening big. I guess maybe It Follows.
It Follows, I'd say,
paranormal and stuff. Paranormal activity.
Yeah, but that got picked up.
That got like a huge P&A watch.
$2 million to promote the movie.
More than that, I would think.
But no, we just thought it'd be interesting to talk about those type of movies, and of course, AJ works in that world. And there's a lot of challenges you probably don't think of when you go to a movie. It's like you don't care that it costs $50,000 or $2 million. You just want to see a good movie. And sometimes there's a lot of challenges on both sides. Mm-hmm. So I guess is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, because, when we were looking back at our films from last year and even the films that have really kind of made waves for this year so far, they're not studio pictures. A lot of them aren't. They're small ones that have kind of emerged that people are championing, things like It Follows and Spring. And
what was the last studio film you liked? The Conjuring?
Conjuring.
Last
I liked Oculus, but even Oculus isn't a studio. Yeah, it's considered an indie.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, most of the movies that end up being studio films anymore, what you're really talking about is studio distribution, because for the most part they're all independently financed. Yeah. So, like what happened with Your Next, or on a smaller scale, but with a bigger return, is what happened with It Follows. They're a movie that's made independently, and they go on the festival circuit. Sales reps or acquisitions people for usually boutique arms of studios like Tom Quinn at Radius for the Weinstein Company. They'll see something somewhere and they'll offer a licensing deal. And then what happens is they didn't pay for the movie, which they could have very easily, because it ends up being, most of these are south of $1 million, which I know still sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking about a couple hundred people being employed for something, and then you've got to, once the movie's shot, pay for people to be working 12 hours a day, like working on editing it or color correction or sound or anything. That is all taken care of, and then you get into the marketing game, which is where they really drop the money. And so these studios have the ability, with the way that the movie industry is now, they have the ability to drop $25 million to ensure a strong opening weekend, at least for their demographic. And then that, in turn, will allow them pretty much, for genre films at least, almost exclusively now, theatrical runs are not for making money. They're for free, essentially cross-pollinating marketing to sell those on VOD or to sell physical media, which is becoming less and less. And then there are distribution people now that don't even do physical media deals, that just want your movie. We ran into a really hard time with The Battery, because we all saw it and we loved it and we wanted to advocate for it. And those guys, it was their first movie, and pretty quickly, I started talking to them and said, I know people at these places that we've had movies at, let's talk to them. And then we found out that they had given away their digital rights. They had licensed their digital rights to Film Buff. And these days, and I talked to everyone that I know. I talked to Magnolia, and I talked to Anchor Bay and Oscilloscope and everybody. And the first question they asked was, well, do they still have their digital rights? And we would say, no, the movie's actually been on iTunes for a few months. That's how we saw it. And across the board, they balked, because that's the only way that they can get money. There are very rare occurrences where a distributor will really believe in a movie so much that they will go, we're not going to have any money. We're not going to make any money off of this, but hopefully we really believe in the movie, and so we want to advocate for people seeing it. Magnolia actually did that with House of the Devil. It wasn't their movie, and they didn't have the physical media rights to it, and they didn't have VOD, and I think that was one of the first movies to actually go video on demand. MPI had that, but Magnolia loved the movie so much that they said, okay, well, we'll be responsible for getting it into theaters, which basically says, okay, we're going to spend $500,000 on this movie and never see a dime just because we like it. But that's really rare these days. So,
can I ask you about something about your next? It was like a firecracker the one time it played in the festival, and then there was a long delay. Is there a different way that you think that film could have done even better in terms of how it was put out instead of the big, a big push?
It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about financially, absolutely not. This is very phallic. And if you're talking, box office-wise,
mostly just
no
eyeballs.
way.
Is there another way you could have platformed it and toured it?
Well, definitely more people saw that movie than any of the other ones, because, and it was very strange for me, as, I've talked about it a lot, as like an indie kid who's used to spending, at the most, like the biggest movie that I've worked on has been about a $4 million movie. But for the most part, we're making movies for under $1 million. And that one was, I think, before we had to get into deliverables, around $800,000 for that movie. And Lionsgate acquired it for a little bit more. And after deliverables are done, it's going to be a break-even event. It's not like they're... And when they say bidding war these days, what they really mean is that there are like 4 or 5 people that are willing to distribute the movie. They're not fighting each other. They're not foaming at the mouth over the next Blair Witch.
Yeah, that rarely happens anymore.
I've been in like 6 movies where they're like, this is the next Blair Witch, and then we make $100,000 in the box office, and they get pissed, and they spend a lot of money on it. But with your next, I'm always surprised that people think of that, at least some of us that either worked on it or in the indie film community think of it as some sort of, oh, nobody saw it. Well, that's just not true, because it made about $20 million domestically, and which is a crazy number for a movie that size, until you take into account that Lionsgate spent probably $25 million on P&A, which is all of the stuff. And my wife and I, we live in Los Angeles, and we couldn't go anywhere. We would see on the side of a bus, we'd be going to get a taco, and on the bench there would be a poster for Your Next, and a bus would pull up and there'd be a poster for Your Next on it, and then across the street there'd be a billboard for Your Next, and then we'd go home, and on MTV there'd be a bit for it on TV. And all I kept thinking about, and we've talked about it before, all I kept thinking about was there are so many filmmakers who could have made so many movies for the cost of putting one poster on the side of Hollywood and Highland. And it just seemed...
Or for the cost of that Lou Reed song for the trailer, right?
For the trailer, which is funny because, when we
Their
did
song
the Signal...
is incredible in the movie, though.
Yeah.
When we did the Signal... this is a little $50,000 movie that nobody ever saw. We had
check it. Anyone seen The Signal? See,
Oh,
thanks.
see, you're in a good
Anyone.
crowd here.
Yeah.
So we had a cover. We had a cover of Perfect Day in that movie, and because of the way that movie was structured, that ended up being a character in the film that played over and over and over again. And we went to Sundance with it, and I think we'd already requested, like, what are the fees for paying to cover? We didn't use Lou Reed's song, but Lou Reed said, I don't like horror movies, so no. But we didn't know this yet when we played it at Sundance. So when they found out that we were the big acquisition that year at Sundance, we then got to pay Lou Reed $200,000 to not have the song in the movie, and it was a $50,000 movie. So Magnolia could have dumped us, and they didn't, and it just took forever, and it was completely heartbreaking to remove a character from the movie and spend a year and a half replacing it. So it was, I had to do a lot of apologizing to my other friends when I saw the trailer for Your Next, and actual Perfect Day was in it. But yeah, they spend a shitload of money on that stuff. And in terms of the time that it took for the movie to come out, people think that Lionsgate dropped the ball. No, what actually happened was Lionsgate merged with Summit, another distribution company. And the way that, like, and most people are savvy these days, so I'm probably not saying anything you don't already know about the distribution process. But Lionsgate, all distributors lease out theater space across America to AMC, to whoever. And they do this 2 years in advance. And so they already knew their 2-year calendar, for the most part, of movies that were going to play. And then they had summits. And so suddenly, when they're one company, there are now 15 movies instead of one that they have to get out, and some of them are already leased into these places, and it's really bad business to open your movie against your movie, you know, because it's actually the same company within that corporation that's promoting the movie.
And we're talking like Twilight and
so
Hunger Games. Like,
So
those
basically,
are movies that are top priority.
and they kind of got to get their money back on those ones.
Yeah.
It's okay for them to not get their money back on Your Next. So they do it in descending order of budget, and then, of course, which one's been in the can the longest. So we just ended up being like 14th or 15th there.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually blown away at how far behind that they got, so far and hard behind it, like promoting it. But at the end of the day, I think that it was a miracle of the number of people that saw it, because you're talking about trying to open a movie against an Oprah movie starring one of the people that started Mumblecore. And just, and it's like, well, these little indie kids that are going to improv their way
Some
through
movies
a movie.
just look like they're just going to crush on like streaming. I see Your Next as a film that would just be huge on Netflix. You know,
Well,
And
but
this
we
is-
don't
huge
know
on
though.
Netflix.
Like they don't tell us.
Yeah,
We
you'll
don't,
never
they don't
hear
have to
those.
report those numbers yet.
Yeah, and this is one of the not reporting is a big thing that we're seeing in the industry right now. This is actually a really fascinating time in the film industry in general, just because everything is in this kind of crux point where everything's transitioning and no one really knows where it's going yet. But because of the emergence of VOD and digital, the physical media side of the entertainment industry, people are declaring it dead now. Like if you go in and talk to some of the distributors, they're like, we're going to stop making DVDs within
bought
the
a
next
DVD
decade.
here, or Blu-ray.
I bought a couple.
Okay.
And that
Right.
makes me so sad as well, because I have that collecting bone in my body that I want that physical media. Surely I'm not the only one, though, but apparently I am. I miss that. Yeah.
But there's still, I have to say, like companies like Scream Factory, I mean, they've definitely are like even Severin or Vinegar Syndrome in there. They've cornered the market with these kind of collectible movies. They're films we've all seen Evil Speak before, but they re-release it, make it really pretty, clean it up, and add some really cool special features to it. And that's something that we as collectors want. But as for like the Walmart, like the movies that you go in and see at Walmart where, it's just a whole bunch of different horror titles, none of them really stand out from the rest of them. It's just shelves of titles. Those are the ones that most of the distribution companies are saying that they're going to fold within the next couple of years, just because at this point, they're getting far more hits and views off of VOD and iTunes and things like that than they ever would off of just pick a film up at Walmart or Target or something like that. But because of that, they don't make as much off VOD or Redbox or Netflix as they would have off of selling you a physical DVD, which is why we're suddenly seeing budgets drop. It used to be like the average film in Hollywood. If you were making a $5 million movie, that was considered to be a micro budget. And now a $5 million movie is like, it blows my mind. They never get made. 90% of the films I see coming out of the genre, I would say fall into 750 or below right now.
And it's creating the question, which is like one of the things we want to talk to AJ about, which is like, how do you make a career now when the residuals, the money that filmmakers, independent filmmakers, and independent actors working in these films would have made if their film got into Redbox or Walmart? When you eliminate that part of the income, how do you cobble together a life and keep doing this as an art?
Yeah, well, they haven't monetized that part yet, so it was never a part of our income.
Okay.
No matter how much, it used to be, we would get points on a movie if they were low budget and they can't pay you. And this happened with Signal. We did a movie for $50,000 in 10 days, and back then there was no VOD, and we didn't know anybody. We hadn't made any movies yet, and so we just sent it off to Sundance because that's what you do. And it took scrounging money to be able to pay for the application fee, the submission fee for it, just to be able to send it. And then it miraculously got in, which is a different thing now. That's also changed too. And it's sometimes hard I try not to talk about it because like getting to be on the inside of that indie world, pretty much now I can tell you who's going to play those festivals because they essentially have a vouch, and now everything's so intertwined. There's still some discoveries, but for the most part, the people that program festivals now are also producers. And so when you live the festival circuit, if you get into that circle and you deliver a movie in time, you're going to get a more fair shake than a new person starting out. But back then, you would sell the movie and there would be points on that. And you would deliver your movie, and after the cost of delivery from that company, they would cut a check, and that's how we would get kind of paid for the movie. So I got paid a little bit for the Signal, and it didn't happen again because what's changed now is that when things go theatrical, it's very hard to get, as an actor in a union, you don't really see anything from that. You can get box office bumps if you have a great agent that will then, say that if your next had actually made $25 million, and you were one of the people whose agent negotiated a deal for you, you might have gotten basically a bonus check for performance. But the only way that you make money for a while as an indie actor is off residuals, and those come from deals that are made for preemptively for selling on iTunes or licensing it to Netflix or to cable, and those they base largely. They used to based on the box office performance. So the rate goes up, the better that it does, and then we get paid whether or not people watch it, and then after a couple of years you renegotiate your contract to continue licensing it. So now there are no points for making a movie, but you hope you get a residual check eventually. And what ends up happening more times than not is you don't end up seeing any money from that ever, because these are mostly corporations that are putting the movies out. And as a corporation, they own all the companies they would normally pay to do things. So they're paying themselves to do their own work and then charging and billing us as filmmakers.
So it's like we have to create the poster. Jim's going to create the poster and he works for me, but I still have to pay Jim to create the poster. So
which and I apologize for being indelicate. It's pretty fucked up because typically as a filmmaker how you want to sell your movie. So we knew, and we also know talented artists, and not just people in front or behind camera. You grew up with talented musicians. You grew up with talented photographers. And in my case, I grew up with people that wanted to do literally every department of film, post and pre and principal photography for it. And so we didn't get to pay the person who would do the art for the one sheet that we would take to a film festival, but there was a lot of thoughtfulness behind it. And it's a piece of art. Someone spent time creating it. And the thing is, okay, well, we can't offer you money, but people will ask us about this poster, or they'll ask us about this piece of music, and we'll be able to tell them who you are, and you'll come to the fest with us. And then another filmmaker that has money will be able to put you to work, and we'll put you to work when we have money. But what ends up happening now is the distributors farm out that work to somebody that they already own. So we have a perfectly good poster. We have a perfectly good trailer from us who knew what we wanted the tone of the movie to be. Mm-hmm. And instead, the distributor now goes, well, what's going to put more butts in seats? And they typically go one of two ways, either romance or, TNA and blood. And if your movie isn't really focused on that, if it's focused on character or sort of different atmospheric elements, they'll still put those things on it. And now you don't have your poster, you have one that doesn't reflect your movie. So less people go see it because you were less specific about what your viewpoint was.
Well, what type of deal was set up with something like The Sacrament? Are you getting residuals for that? Because I want you to. Because that was a cracking good film.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but it's true.
I did get it. What do we get? We get about like. I'm sorry, my wife's in here. We got what, $11 for The Sacrament, and that was our big check.
That's $11 you didn't have before, sir.
It paid for the McMuffin sandwich I just had. What with Sacrament, basically the way that worked is it was an expensive movie as far as genre movies go, especially when you've got someone like me as the lead of the movie that isn't. There's not a $25 million market to go see the bearded guy. Like, show up and.
Is that why Eli Roth's name was above it? Like that's the draw that he's the star.
Well, actually, yeah. So what happened is, and Ty, who is like a brother to me, is actually one of those people that's legitimately brilliant, and which is rare. Most people get told that online, but Ty's actually a really, really intelligent guy. He's so good at what he does that basically he was hanging out with Eli, and Eli was like, we all kind of know each other, and Eli and Ty are friends and been looking to make something together. And Eli was like, well, do you have any ideas? There were people, I think it was like Eli's birthday party, and there were a bunch of people there. And Ty pulled one out of his ass and was like, which got him greenlit a movie with Nicole Kidman, by the way. He had a meeting with her because she liked House of the Devil, and was like, I would love to know do you have
Nicole
anything?
Kidman, fan of House of the Devil.
That's pretty cool.
So Australian too. So I know that
Put that on the
she's
poster.
Yeah. So she asked him. She was like, I would love to make a movie with you. Do you have anything for me? And he was like, Yeah, I've got a thing for you. And she's like, Tell me about it. So he improvised his way through a thing that he thought, well, she might be into this. And he told her, and she was like, that's great. Can I read a script? And he said, well, you know what? Since you're interested in it, I would like to rewrite it and revise some things. So can you give me 5 days to do that?
5 days?
5 days.
That's like not sleeping.
Can you give me
for
5
script
days to take a look at it and, make sure that the grammar, make sure I didn't mess any of that up so that it looks professional, and then I'll give it to you. And she was like, that would be great. Ty went home and wrote that script in 4 days. Gave it to her. She was like, this is phenomenal. I want to do it. And it got greenlit. And then the way that most things work, it's so impossible to get a movie made, even if it's greenlit, even if there's money in the bank.
I would say at least 60% of the films that we hear about that are taking place in Hollywood never happen. That's why a lot of people are like, you guys seem like you said something on the show and then you were like, oh, we can't talk about that yet. That's a lot of reason why things like that happen is we'll hear about movies and then knowing that they will likely kind of get kiboshed along the way.
Or even there's legal stuff with that too. It's like, oh shit, am I supposed to say that?
Yeah, because we can't announce
AJ's talking to them about that.
Yeah.
So that's basically what happened with Sacrament. Ty had always wanted to do a thing about Jonestown, but he wanted to actually do an 8-part miniseries for HBO, and he tried to get the ability to do that about Jonestown, where you would use the people's names, but you would be really exhaustive about the content of it, where the least important part was the horrific end to there. Because we always were in agreement about thinking that, well, nobody's ever talking about the people that were there. Those were human beings, and they didn't choose to most of them didn't choose to die. So it was kind of a weird thing, but Eli had Green Inferno getting ready to be going at the same time.
Elric's a big fan.
Elric loves Green Inferno. He's a huge Eli Roth fan in general.
I also like fart jokes. So the two fit perfectly.
I love you, Eli.
The sound effect. I appreciate it.
You won't be listening to this, but if you're listening to this, Eli, Elric does not speak for the rest of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Necessarily.
I think he was okay with Hostel too.
So basically, and this happens a lot actually. There'll be 2 films, and there'll be one financier, and they'll say, okay, well, we'll give you, let's say Ty and I maybe could have gotten 1.2 for Sacrament, because from the outset it was going to be, Ty's directing this movie, AJ's going to be playing this vice guy, and that was all that we knew for certain, and there was no script yet. And Worldview, who was getting ready to do Eli to finance Green Inferno, was like, okay, so instead of spending $6 million and getting one movie, we'll spend $10 million and we'll get 2. Which sounds like you're still breaking even, but you're not really, because you're setting up 2 different LLCs, and one movie can absorb the other's cost if one goes over, and then if one goes under, it basically can help one another. And this is a very frequent occurrence in the independent film world.
Yeah,
so basically,
it's slating films is the term, where you're doing 5 films all in one swoop with the same budget, so that way if one completely tanks, you can use the other one to offset that.
Yeah, and on the executive level, you have the same people, which also helps, because then there's less lawyers and there's less emails and less conference calls. So basically, the idea was Ty and AJ are going to make The Sacrament for $3 or $4 million, and then at the same time, Eli's going to do Green Inferno. And Eli was never involved in like the actual production itself. He would help promote it and talk about it, and he would have discussions with Ty about where he saw the cut going. But what ended up happening with The Sacrament is we ran into financial problems with that one. And also at the end of the day, and initially it was going to be a much more mainstream film, but we had money problems, and credit to Ty, we were there thinking, okay, we're not going to get to finish this movie. And Ty kind of was like, fuck it, I'm going to make a weird movie. Like, if I don't know that I'm going to have it, if I don't know if we're going to get to continue shooting, I'm going to make a very specific film the way that I would do a movie, the things that I want to talk about with this. So the tone of the movie kind of changed right as we were starting to do it. And so, but it cost us $4 million to make a $3 million movie. We spent $1 million just went away on that one, completely evaporated, and it still cost us about that much to make the movie, and it was a very tough sell. There's not a lot of exploitable elements on it. It's not fun. So basically, we went to. The difference with that one is we had huge critical response, which we had never really had before. We're used to like the indie film community or the internet being really kind to us, but we were not used to things like Variety giving us a positive review, or the Hollywood Reporter, or getting to premiere the movie at the Venice Film Festival. So we got to Toronto with it. It was really well received, and it was also really hated by the people that didn't like it, which was great, because you're leaving a strong impression. And that's actually really good business for us. And also creatively, it's really good for us, because that's what I want. I want you to either love it or hate it, and then I want to have a conversation about it. I don't give a shit about like middle of the road, like, then I really fucked up.
Yeah,
right?
that's surprisingly one of the best marketing tools that you can have. When you have a film like It Follows, where it's very polarizing, and people are either like, it's the greatest film I've ever seen, or, oh my God, that was just a piece of drivel on screen.
It's the greatest film I've ever seen.
So,
see?
Wait, I want to do. How many of you seen It Follows? Seen it? How many of you liked it? All right, that's pretty. And what about the Babadook? How many saw Babadook?
Okay, so I love
Just
Babadook.
And how many of you liked it?
as the resident Australian in the room, I think I get to ask that question. How many of you liked the Babadook? Because I really loved it, and I saw that in the cinema back home in Australia, and it was packed house, and the sound was fantastic, and I was really, really unnerved. So people liked it, because the impression that I get is it's incredibly divisive.
See, and that's what we saw with a lot of our friends, and I have to say it was a weird one, because Elric and Rob and I all agreed on it, which rarely ever happens. Usually if Elric likes it, it's like a guarantee I'm going to fucking despise it. That's just a given. And Rob's always like, he kind of, goes back and forth between who he's siding with on each one. But yeah, we kind of...
I mean, we've talked, the first half of the show now has been about the business, and so let's make the second half about passion and what turns us on, and especially with AJ, what keeps you going. Because the thing that impresses me most about since I've met AJ was the fact that he seeks out filmmakers that interest him. If he sees a movie like The Battery, he was the first one to tell us about The Battery. Then we championed The Battery on the show, and eventually Scream Factory put it out from that chain of events.
And now that guy has
Jeremy
more films on the way.
And we're talking about It Follows. We're talking about The Babadook. Here's what I love about movies, and the reason I keep doing the show, and I think it's similar to, I'm guessing, why AJ, with some of the acting and seeking out filmmakers, is the films that we have heard nothing about.
Yeah.
I had never even heard the word Babadook when I saw that movie. I'd never heard the word It Follows. I didn't know it was... Well, I'd heard that it was at Cannes. That's all I knew about it. I hadn't seen an image. Those films, that's exciting. That's like you're still discovering something. Just like when we used to go to video stores and see a cover and go, holy shit, what is this? But all these Hollywood movies, when we've heard about Ouija for 7 months, and then the movie comes and you're like, oh my God, I couldn't feed that to a dog. You know what I mean? And it's that discovery. And I think a lot of you are here because you discovered a podcast or you discovered us yesterday doing trivia or whatever. And and you pass it along, just like they keep passing it along and it follows. But it's, you know,
Oh my
you didn't
god!
have to sleep with us yet.
Did you guys catch that? Did you see what he did?
See what he did.
So I'm throwing it to all of you, including Aaron. You know, how'd you hear about even the show? You know, in Australia.
We don't
have internet.
Yeah, we don't have internet. I was sent a pigeon with a scroll attached to its leg.
From the House of Baratheon?
Yeah, exactly. Through word of mouth in terms of the podcast. But in terms of movies, it is passed along, you know? It does follow online friends, usually, podcasts, that type of thing. Twitter, social media is a big one as well. That's where I'm hearing a lot of things as well.
Had you heard about Babadook in Australia? Because that's the point of origin with the movie. Had you guys heard about it before it premiered there? Was there talk of it?
People had. I had not. It was purely word of mouth. Somebody sent me through a link, and I went, ooh, I can't believe I didn't know that this was in the pipeline. I genuinely think that the Australian film industry doesn't promote itself strongly enough within Australia, let alone internationally. It absolutely stuns me that you even know what the Babadook is, in all honesty.
And it could have been even bigger, I feel. But do you want to speak a bit to discovery and passion? I mean, AJ, how you actually look for filmmakers and roles?
I'm trying not to pass out here at this table. Okay. No, and we've talked a lot about this. I'm sure a lot of people have a similar situation, and I'm actually curious from Aaron too. But we grew up in a very specific time, and I can't even explain it. I don't want to be that old guy that's like, oh, back in my day. But, it was amazing to grow up when the video store was hitting, like when that was a big deal. And, all of us would go, hey, is that God?
Technology's ruining it all.
It was like you were saying, like just discovering something here, seeing a title for the first. Like we still have memories of like videos that we saw, but we never got to rent it.
Oh yeah, like The Body Shop. I will forever remember that cover. I've never seen the movie. It's probably awful. It never made it to DVD, but I will always remember that.
Yeah,
cover.
And you like if you saw it at this convention, you'd buy. You'd be like,
I would get it
$60
immediately.
I'm buying it.
And again, it might be horrible, but I'm just like, it's the cover. It holds something for me.
Yeah, and I think you said it a few episodes ago. It's like, when I see a new movie from any genre, but especially horror, I just want to feel something. I just want to see something new. I want to because I love back in New York. Because I'm originally from New York, I had a lot of friends that they're into movies, but I was the movie guy, and I would very regularly find something like The Signal or Behind the Mask, and I was the one that would rally them all together and be like, we have to watch this movie, and then all of them, and then they'd be like, oh, that was a great movie, but none of them would have went and seeked it out because they just didn't have any ambition. But that's how I discovered movies, and I love that about the show and interacting with you guys online and stuff. It's like that's exciting when you discover something. You just want to tell everybody about it. Yeah. So
I think mine is kind of seeing the undiscovered gems, which is still the same thing. It's still in the same lines of discovery. But being at Fango, I get literally 200 press releases a day. I wish I was kidding about that. But and some of them are like big swanky press releases from studios, and then some of them are just people like, hey, I made a zombie film in my backyard with my friends, telling us about it. And we get so many. So it's things like the Babadook. We'll know about a year in advance, and we'll know it's coming. So, and we know which ones they're really going to do pushes for or take to festivals, but then it's the ones that get kind of disregarded and just pushed and end up just, bulk buy on Netflix, and then we discover how kick-ass they are. Like Taking of Deborah Logan was one for me.
We learned about that through our fans.
Yeah.
I think it's the only film I can think of like that. Where
there's been a couple where somebody's just messaged me and been like, just watch it.
Detention
was one where I had been talking about it, and a fan messaged me and was like, hey, it's on Netflix. You should check it out. It didn't get much attention. And then that day I said something to Rob at the studio. I was like, have you ever heard of a film called Detention? One of the fans just said I should check it out, and he was like, you're going to love it. And I did. Yeah. So it's these ones that kind of just get swept under the rug that I'm then going, hey, no one else gave this love. I'm going to. And for me, older films are a big thing. If I can find something that came out in the 80s that, was completely forgotten or disregarded that I've never seen before, that's where I get really passionate.
Right before we came here, AJ and I were talking, and that's our goal this summer is like, we're going to watch all summer slasher horror movies, and we're going to find one that neither of us have. We have to discover.
Have you seen Disconnected?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, you were at the screening with me.
Okay.
Dang.
It's this
not a summer movie.
This
not a
might
summer movie.
speak to that kind of thing a little bit. I have this dream.
Can we get some underscore, please?
This is about shit's about to get really real. There's this, and like again, I'm glad that Amanda's here because she can back me up on this. Since I was 6 years old, there's a movie of which I do not know the title, and back then, of course, I didn't know that this is what I was going to be doing. I saw it back then, but the age that I am. TV had a hard time filling content on the weekends during the day. There were 3 channels back then. There were actually 4. And so on Saturdays in the early 80s, they would play shitloads of horror movies. Now, I was never allowed to watch horror movies as a kid, but my parents would be doing shit, and these were edited for TV, and so I would see them like all afternoon. That's how I saw the first several Friday films that I saw. I saw on a Saturday afternoon on like The Fox. And I was like, holy shit, this is the thing that I saw in the video store, the box that scared the shit out of me. But there was this one in the woods, and I remember the ending of it. And the 2 things in horror that I most freak out about are Christmas movies, Christmas horror movies, and then camper slasher movies. I can't tell you why. I grew up in Georgia. I went to camp where they shot Jason Lives, so that may have something to do with it. But I'm on this lifelong odyssey to find this movie, and I've been looking for it since 1983. So I know it was made before then, but I don't know the name of it.
We're going to solve this in 3 minutes.
It's not gonna, I promise you it's not going to happen because that means that I've been looking for it for 31 years. And I can't find it. I'm even like every time I let them know every time I get one, and I'm like, I think this is going to be it. I think this is going to be the one. And I sit down and watch it.
What is it?
Yeah, tell us, Jesus.
No, that's what I'm saying. I have no fucking idea.
No, but
my God.
but
You don't have a
are there any
memory? You don't
moments
remember the
at the
scene
end
or
that you
anything?
remember?
Yeah,
Well,
nothing.
I've been doing this for so long. Like I tell you guys
matter.
this, and you're going to throw out things like Just Before Dawn.
No, we're not going to throw
Forever.
anything out. We're going to get it right.
So
So one person out
you're
there is gonna
definitely
say it
not
right.
going to get it right, Elric. You don't really watch movies.
Oh, yeah. That's, yeah, right.
I'm sorry. I'm just busting your chops.
You're taking my line to Bekah.
overrated.
You can't steal
Yeah, that's what he said.
So I know that there's like a guy and a girl, 2 couple campers. No. No. And it's also not Don't Go in the Woods, which I thought had promise because I'd seen that one a long time ago, and then I was like, oh, maybe it's Don't Go in the Woods because there's like a rock wall, but they're like inbred too, like inbred monster things. I know how the movie ends is that like a dude falls down the side of a cliff, and then the girl gets stuck there, and she gets impregnated.
Oh, yeah, it's Wrong Turn 2. I'm confident.
No, what? Yeah.
The Prey?
But I watched The Prey. I'm doing a thing. And that's how it ends? If that's how it ends, I'm going to suck your dick.
Oh, yeah. For one moment, could Amanda please leave the room? We have a promise to fulfill, and it involves
I'm
fellatio.
going to check. I swear I saw that movie, but I'm going to check.
That I love that. If this is the case,
if that ends up being the, do you own a record player? Okay, well,
He's
if that
gonna
ends
send
up
you
being
good
the
stuff.
case, I'm going to find out. And if that ends up being the case, I'm going and buying you whatever you want from the guys selling vinyl.
this is the reason we
Wow.
did this episode today.
but not anything, like one thing. Is that okay? I'll pay the pallet.
I like he turned to his wife. He's like, "Is it okay if I buy this guy something?"
So many fans have that. I've discovered that one, like a memory that they've grasped onto of I can't remember where this came from. And I had one for the longest time of an alien that was extracting pure protein and weaving it into I'll call it kind of hanging sacks. And I could never figure out what it was from, but it scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. And somebody eventually told me it was an Outer Limits episode from the 80s. And I ended up watching it again, and I was like, oh my God, it was like a song had been stuck in my head for 20 years, and it finally left. It was kind of
And I saw
amazing.
Krull in 3D.
Krull was never in 3D.
No, I saw it in 3D.
No, you didn't.
Fuck
You saw
all
Metal
y'all.
Storm.
But that's 3D.
Krull
Only
was
one.
never in
It was never in
3D.
3D. Okay.
It was glorious. I don't know what you said. No, but
that was what I mean.
mismemories are interesting too because they get mixed up when you're little. you know.
I mentioned that for a reason other than
Other than to be solved.
we're now in a monogamous relationship. But I mention it. I mention it
You
because
ladies should- yeah.
that is the exact thing that I found in my friend's basement. That's what made me start loving horror. Was it would be this shared experience that not everybody was into. And then you get older and you find out wherever you live that you're a freak for the area. For at least in my case, I grew up in Georgia and was like, I have different thoughts than these people. I don't fit in here. And I would have a couple of friends. And then I get to college and I find a couple more people like that. We start making movies together. And the reason that Rob and I are so close is because it's the exact same thing. We found each other in New York and had that conversation that you do when you become friends with someone when you're 9 or 10 years old. You start quizzing each other on movies. You start talking about them. And you start finding out that you have a shared interest. And then all you want to do is be able to show this person something that they haven't seen that means something to you. And you trade that way. You barter friendship that way. And for me as a performer, as a writer, as an actor, or whatever, that's a big part. When we were talking about things like The Battery, I got to see that movie and was like, I need everybody that I care about and anybody that I don't even know yet to see this movie, because you can see that I need this person to make another movie because I'm selfish and I want to watch what this person, I want this to advocate. It's boring to talk about yourself. I don't trust people that make movies that do. Like, I hate that shit. I hate the word I. Fucking hate it. I doesn't make a movie, we do. And when you see somebody doing something that you didn't know about, you've got to tell people about it, because there's like, a lot of us don't live in Dallas, but we're in the basement of this hotel together this weekend for the one time in our lives that we're all going to be here. And there might be something that you've seen that somebody doesn't know about that you can turn them on about. And then you get to have this whole new experience. That's what we were talking about, looking for camper slasher movies, looking for like the movie that you sent me over Christmas. This obscure thing. I might not like it, but it doesn't matter. I got to see
Ghost
it.
Samurai in Wisconsin on Christmas killing
Blood
people.
Beat.
Blood
Amazing.
Blood Beat.
And how do you describe it? It's actually shot in like 82, and he's like, this movie.
Yeah. It's like it was shot in 1982, but it feels like a movie that was shot in 2015 where they didn't have the budget to be able to get the time period right.
Of 1982.
So they went 82.
Which is endorsement enough to watch it.
I recommend watching everything.
Yeah.
Literally every movie.
You know, we were talking at breakfast this morning about how, this is still true in Hollywood, horror is the underdog. It still is in Hollywood. You mean, there are people who make movies, and then there are people who make horror, and it's weird because we're always kind of lumped in this weird little area, and even geographically we're kind of lumped. We're all in the valley. I mean, it's a weird little kind of underdog environment that happens. But at the same time, if anything, I think that definitely invigorates my passion as well, because we're fighting for something. It becomes like a mission in what we're doing, and we're spreading almost like a word around of everything that's going on.
I always feel like, I don't know. I only want horror films to be made by people who really had something to say and wanted to make a movie, and that they didn't just go, oh, well, horror is the one thing that sells, so I'm going to make a horror film. I just can't watch that stuff anymore. I need somebody who said, I'm so passionate about making this story, and horror is the place I can be subversive, where I can get this across. And that's why I think a lot of filmmakers who are just filmmakers making other films, I think it's telling that the director of Babadook wouldn't classify herself as a horror director. She's a director, and that's the next movie she makes probably won't be horror. Then she'll come back when she has something to say. Robert Mitchell, who made It Follows, his first film's, a teenage slumber party movie or whatever. And so I think that's important. I think some people are just falling into that trap going, I'm a horror director and this is what I make, and then how much can you say in that?
Well, what you're talking about is sincerity versus insincerity. Okay. And for me, that's really, I don't like to get into the good bad movie. We've talked about this so much. Like, everyone thinks that they're educated enough to say whether a movie's good or bad, and I would say 90+% of those people that say that statement, what they're actually saying is whether they liked or disliked the movie, and that good or bad in terms of filmmaking technique or story writing has nothing to do with what they're talking about. They liked it or they didn't. And for me, I really hate things like so bad it's good. I want to fucking punch people in the face when I see that kind of shit. Because I'm like, idea of a guilty pleasure. No, it's a fucking movie. If you like it, don't feel guilty about it. Figure out how to speak about what you enjoy about it, and don't feel bad about it because somebody worked really hard on it. So we can see, as people that like genre films, someone that's trying to cash grab, and more times than not, that's the studio system when they're actually financing and making the movie. And that's fair, because really every single movie that they make, that's what they're doing. But people don't care about those movies for the most part as much as we care about our movies, so we smell bullshit really quickly on that. I'll take a movie that's got a fucked up third act where the acting's a little whack, or you see like some really bad colored fake blood or something wonky, if it's sincere. If I know that someone earnestly failed and swung for the fences, there's probably something in it that I enjoy watching.
You know, Rob had recommended a movie to me that fits perfectly into that. This film called Little Aaron Merriweather.
Yeah.
And I can't say that it's not the best made movie at all. It's definitely got some glaring flaws to it, but the sincerity just leaks off the screen.
Oh, Found last year had that. Found they were committed. It's not my favorite movie, but there's so much in it that was from the heart, and these guys believed in it, and that it totally washed over you, and you're like, okay, this is a real film. This guy's saying his next film will probably blow you away. You know?
Yeah, and the thing with Found is because that was one that had a lot of budgetary restriction, and it looks like a really cheap movie. But look, if you have a passion in a story you want to tell, you'll figure out a way to make it no matter what. And the best analogy, I posted a picture on the Killer POV page. Somebody came to our table yesterday that had his costume was just a Freddy glove as like a hat.
That was amazing.
And like silly string, so he could be the guy that gets,
we just went straight up to him. We're like, you won Texas.
Yeah, we're like, that's a great.
Boom.
How much could that have cost? Like $15 for the glove and some strings, but that was like the best costume.
A lifetime of back problems.
But
that's the thing. It's like if you want to do something cool like that, and that's the thing. It got everyone's attention. Like I see that parallel in movies too. Like just because you're like I don't have the money to do it now, but if you could figure out a way, and even if it looks. You could see the seams. If it's sincere, it'll stand out.
And it drives me crazy. Since It Follows come out, I've had more fights about that movie than any, and not with these guys where they're like, it didn't totally work for me. That's totally fine. I've had fights with people telling me I'm wrong about it. Like, I won't call them out, but a friend of mine just tells me, no, you're actually wrong. There's no way that can be a great film, and there's no way people can love it because XYZ, the story, XYZ, the plot. I'm like, I don't care about any of those things. But I don't care.
They call you a liar. They tell you that you're lying.
It's just like,
about your
this
opinion.
film affected me in a way that I haven't been affected by a horror film in a long time, which is a feeling I think the last time was maybe Nightmare on Elm Street when I was young, and a feeling of like I don't know where this is going, and I like watching it because it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's also there's something really weird and creepy. And I wasn't thinking about the plot holes. I haven't seen it a second time, so I might watch it through a different lens. So it's not about is this good or bad. It's about it affected me, and that's all there is to movies, in my opinion.
Remember you said this next time you're ridiculing me for my Freddy's Dead
You're
love?
wrong about
I love Freddy's Dead.
I'm just kidding.
It amused me.
Cooper's
it affected
great in
me.
I love Freddy's Dead.
He hates it.
But on the flip side, I loved It Follows, and it did have an effect on me. I actually was I saw it, and I was on the borderline, I think, of maybe getting sick. Anyway, I got so many chills from watching It Follows that I think it synthesized a cold, and I got really sick. But going back to Found as well, I really liked that film, and I was watching it and thinking to myself, yeah, maybe I wish he just had that little bit more money. Maybe that little bit more money, or somebody gave him some more money to remake this and to put it out there. But then I went, no, actually, no. It's
I had that
the
same
sincerity
idea.
Yeah,
Like,
the sincerity of it is it shines.
Handmade. There's a handmade quality.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it felt like sculpture.
Well, we are at about 12 minutes, so let's get some audience questions.
We want to include you in the conversation. Why don't you come up?
Especially if you
hear
came all the way from
Armando, right?
Mexico.
He came all the way from Mexico,
All the way from
guys.
Mexico.
Give this man a hand.
How
Mexico.
awesome is that?
Hola. Okay, now that I got the cliche out. I actually want to recommend a director for your show. I studied screenwriting in USC for the summer, and I met this director, writer known as Ben Krishman. He's actually at Stanley premiering his film Sunchoke with Barbara Crampton.
I saw a picture of that. It looked cool. Sunshine, cool night.
I
Title.
saw the trailer, and I haven't seen the film yet, and I really want to see it. It would be like the great double feature with Starry Eyes.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So
Consider
if you
it
guys-
done.
We will
find
make
this
it
person and put him
happen.
on the show.
If you guys can have
We'll get
on
him
your
back with the
show,
Starry Eyes, so it's like the ultimate double feature
Yeah.
episode, too.
I want to recommend that guy to you. So
Excellent.
I want to put a shout out for him.
Okay.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thanks so much, man. Anyone else want to comment or say
Questions, comments.
anything? Don't be shy.
Come on,
We're
long-time
open.
listeners. You've
Come
been sitting
on.
there pent up. Yes, over there in the corner. Over there
Right
first.
here.
Yeah.
Hey, come on up, man.
Look at that
What's your
T-shirt.
name?
It's John.
John.
Show them your T-shirt.
He's wearing Pat Healy.
It's Pat Healy
Or it
shirt.
could be AJ Bowen.
He's
We don't
supporting
know.
independent film.
Yeah, so my question was, it's not really a question, but kind of a suggestion. You guys are all kind of in the industry, and you know, like great actors like AJ, and you do like short films. Like I've seen all your short films. Have you guys ever thought about just kind of doing your own thing and like creating, like say, like a production company where it's just all of you guys and your friends? Because it seems like you have a lot of talented. Because I know at the Jump Cut they do the thing with the screening with the scripts. And have you ever thought about just all, because you do music and you do acting and everything, so have you guys ever thought about that?
I like the title Killer
of course.
POV Productions.
Yeah.
We've of course thought about it.
Yeah.
This is a very, very complicated issue that I don't know. It's just, how do we answer this?
Well, I mean, I think we could do something all together, but we're also really different. I mean, our tastes are really different. It's amazing when three people, and people don't know, some of you we've mentioned, I mean, I had never even met Rob.
I hadn't either.
Yeah.
I knew about each other. We knew about each other, but we weren't friends before this. We didn't
met
know
once
each other
before our first episode, and he tried to tell me about it. I was like, nope, we'll do it on air.
Yeah.
I'll get to know you
and
that way.
so this could have all gone pear-shaped after 10 episodes. And
Yeah.
the first couple, to be honest, felt weird to me a little bit, and I hadn't really done radio, and just, you feel each other out. And then eventually your personalities, even though you're all very different, something works. Something keeps us coming back every week to want to talk about movies together. We're not being paid to do it. There's a reason to keep coming back.
Yeah, I mean, we would love to pool our resources together and make cool shit. But
We're all trying to make films or music.
Yeah, honestly, we see it with a lot of our friends in LA who will try to pool resources and work together, and a lot of times it ends very tragically, sadly. And sometimes it works out great, but a lot of times, I mean, that's the quickest way to kill a friendship in LA is make a film with them. So
That's kind of what I do for a job, is pretty much the people that I've worked with, we continue to work together, and pretty much it's sort of like the same talking about, like Jeremy with the battery. My job, or the specific, if I'm acting in a movie, my job more than just at least equal as playing a character is advocating for that script, and by proxy advocating for that set of filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
So if I do my job, best case scenario is they get to make another movie where the budget point and the visibility point boxes me right out of being able to do it, so that they go get famous people that will then allow them to keep making movies and hopefully get health insurance. But that's kind of what we do, for me personally, I recommend it as long as everyone respects the business part of it, because one of the things I love about film is that it's art and commerce, and finding a way to responsibly marry those two things is wonderful. And if you can find people that you do that with, then you should continue to do it with them.
yeah.
Let's do a couple more.
I saw one over here. Oh, yeah.
Oh, right here.
there.
Come on up. Hi, what's your name again?
Dustin. I was wondering, are there some movies that when you first watch, you initially find yourself not liking them at all, but then you realize the more you find yourself talking about them, whether or not they were even good or not, or whether you like the experience of watching them, just talking about them made the whole experience worthwhile? Like for me, It Follows was actually one of those. My wife would greatly disagree on that. I found myself, I was like, I didn't really like that when I watched it, but then the more I kept talking about things and questioning, did the pools have any meaning at all, or were they just pools? If they were really relevant, sometimes do those things make a movie better for you?
I mean, I also just know some movies, if they actually, I think what he was talking about earlier about love or hate a movie is, polarizing effects is actually a good thing. It's if I have a visceral reaction to a movie, even a negative one, something happened, and then maybe it touched something. And the one for me growing up was Cronenberg movies when I was young, not now. When I was young, my first viewing of them was almost universally loathing, like something almost repulsed by, especially Dead Ringers when I was way too young, and then Crash.
Oh, yeah.
Crash. I remember sitting in the theater going, "Why am I watching? What is going on?" And then later on, I think about their movies, and they become some of my favorite, not necessarily rewatch movies, but just movies I think about over time and time again. And yet that first initial connection is oh, I don't want to see this. And so I think, that's a slightly different reaction, but yeah.
I think mine works in reverse a lot of the time, because one of the big focuses that I have within my research work and in my job is I usually get handed the really intense stuff, if it has intense gore, anything that, way over the top, controversial films, things like Human Centipede or Serbian Film. And a lot of times when I first watch it, I'll have that initial reaction of shock of what I'm watching. And that kind of manifests itself as, oh my God, I was shocked. The filmmaker did something there. It must be good. And then it takes me a while to step back and go, you know what? That really wasn't that good of a film. Besides, if you take the shock outside of it, I did that with The Divide actually last year, where that was a really intense film. And the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, that so affected me. I was crying at the end of it because the world was ending. That's not spoiling it by any means. That's not a spoiler.
It opens like that. Yeah.
It opens like that, so you know what's going on. But it took me a while, a couple of months actually, before I was just sitting there one day and I was like, you know what? Outside from that, tugging at my heartstrings, it really wasn't a good movie. I heard somebody call it theater of cruelty, where it was just like it's mean to the audience for 2 hours, and therefore you have like a reaction to it, but it's just not.
Somebody might like that. That's the weird thing. There's something
weird.
for everyone. You know?
But like with Serbian films, something like that, where I watched it and I was like, oh my God, this is so shocking. It affected me. And I gave it a really positive review. You know, now a year later, a couple of years later, I still look at it and I'm like, you know what? Even if you were to take out all of that horrible visceral stuff, it's still a well-made film. Like it still has some really.
It's
I'm pushed
underneath
to
it,
say
it's
it, but
saying
it's got
something.
beautiful shots. Yeah,
So-
and I don't buy into the whole. It's the plight of the Serbian people presented on film stuff. I don't take the altruistic message by any means, but just as a film, you know, it's got that. I like.
There's
the
a
Alice
dude
in
walking
Wonderland.
around the convention hall with a T-shirt saying like "I love Serbian film." I just passed him and I was like, "That's cool." You know?
Well, the only thing I wanted to add about that is I think that changes all the time, just depending on where you are in life when you see a movie. Like your person, like again, like we could all go see a movie, but we're all going to react to it differently because of our personal life experiences up till that moment that we walked in the theater, and that happens a lot with classic films, like. You know, some of the classic stuff, me and Elric like to space out. Like, we don't like to watch it a lot. It's because it has such a profound effect. But a movie like The Shining, like, it fucked me up as a kid, and I only watch it every couple years. And every couple years, I have almost a slightly different opinion on it. I know AJ for a fact.
that was the one that I was going to mention.
Like, and then one day you just watched it on a plane.
No, but that speaks to all the stuff that we were talking about. Because when you're talking about like, well, fuck you, It Follows sucks, It Follows is great. What's great about that, and what's great about coming here, and what we were talking about becoming friends with each other, is the conversation. The conversation about the movie and each person's perspective about it. And so the conversation is what makes me more times than not go back to a movie that didn't connect with me. Especially if I know on a technical level that's a really well-made film, but I wasn't into it. I didn't like it. If someone, you know, like Elric and I do that all the time, we often have very different opinions on movies, and then we'll start talking to each other about it, but not in that, like, anachronistic way. Like, we'll just be like, well, here's what I had an issue with, and then I go, oh, we really need to watch that movie again. And for me specifically, when I was younger, I always had a hard time with Kubrick. I just was like I have a hard time when there's a sort of an emotional detachment from a filmmaker. And so when there's something that's emotionally stiff or cold, I would typically, even we're talking like 6 years old, I'd be like, no, I prefer E.T. And I remember watching The Shining and being like, fuck that movie, which is one of the dumbest things you could ever say. And I had really good friends that would tell me, you're high, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, it's one of the best horror movies ever made. And I'm like...
Not one of the best adaptations, but...
Well, I'm not even talking about it. Let's just talk about it as a movie.
We'll
just talk about it as a movie. And I'd be like, get the fuck yourself, you don't know what you're talking about. But because they were my friends and I respected them, even if I didn't agree with them about any movie, I would try again. Because for me, what's very important is, I think for all of us as film lovers, is to allow our tastes and allow ourselves to grow along with it as we get older. Stuff that I didn't connect with when I was younger, I connect with in a different, more profound way now, and vice versa. And so I would always go back to The Shining every year or two, and I would try to watch it, and I'd be like, so fucking boring. It's so boring, which is funny since I make movies with Ty. And literally, I tried like for 8 years to watch this movie. And then one time, I just wrapped shooting a movie in Atlanta. I was on a flight. I had the DVD with me. I would always travel with it and be like, oh, I'll watch it again. And then I never would. And I was on a plane back to L.A. I popped it in on the flight with my headphones in, and I started watching it and literally had that moment. And we've had this before with other movies, too, where I went, holy shit, have you guys ever seen The Shining? It's like one of the best horror movies ever made. I can't fucking believe this. And then I would turn to the children on the plane beside me and be like, have you seen The Shining? This is a fucked up movie. And then I got home and I would watch it again, and now I would put The Shining in like my top 5 horror movies. What's great is that list can change.
Yeah, as we
can always change.
We've got to almost wrap, but I wanted to let Aaron. Aaron gets final question, but we're happy to keep answering your questions after, but they need the room. Aaron is our special guest. He's going to ask one thing, and it'll be super quick response.
Okay, well, I guess broadly speaking, firstly a comment. The thing that's really great about the podcast is that it, to me, simulates the experience of going to the video store.
I want that as our tagline.
Yeah, it's because that doesn't exist anymore, sadly. And like you guys, I long for that. This is the simulation. This is the modern day equivalent of going to the store and browsing through the tiles and having that person who is at the front desk saying, "Hey, this is awesome. You should watch this," or "This is slightly out of reach. It's on the top shelf. You have to kind of reach up." That's great. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on is there is no such thing as a guilty pleasure. So I was wondering, are there going to be any more drunken debates? Because the drunken debates,
the most controversial
awesome.
episode.
For those of you guys who don't know,
Hold on, quick note, big news. Stay in your seats. We just told we could have an extra 30 minutes if we wanted, and we want it, right?
Yeah.
We want it. We were just told. So we were rushing to get out, but we're here.
So you guys have to totally get it. But we've talked about doing another drunken debates episode. But last time, for those of you guys who aren't like complete and total experts with the show, I guess it was probably about our 50th episode or so. It was about halfway through.
I think it's like 42 or something.
Yeah, we did an episode where we brought in some of our filmmaker friends from LA. It was Dave Parker, Mike Williamson, and
Brian Collins.
Brian Collins. And we brought these people in because they tend to have really strong opinions on movies. Like Brian Collins will tell you that My Soul to Take is one of the greatest films ever made. And he will stick on it and say there's no arguing with him. And Mike Williamson is the same way about a number of films.
Like the Mangler. There, at least he's not saying it's a guilty pleasure, right?
Yeah.
He's saying, I love My Soul to Take. Film. And then he's right.
So we had this episode, which we called the Drunken Debates, where we each had to bring a number of films that we think legitimately are really good films that tend to be kind of disregarded by a lot of people. Like I said, Phantoms was my choice. I know. Everyone still laughs at me. Ending's a little weird, but the first part of the movie, I still stay, is a great horror film. And we got really drunk to do it. Because of it, it kind of became, I'll call it an expert episode. Like you really had to know what was going on ahead of time, because the drunker we get, we all start really talking over top of each other. That's the one. He was slurring so bad in that one. And the drunker Mike Williamson got, the angrier he got, so that he's like yelling. But I know.
We're wasting time.
Yeah,
I know.
But, I was listening to that in my car, and I had it turned up really loud, and I was at a stoplight, and it was just swearing after a while. And I actually wound up my windows because this little old lady was looking at me like, what are you listening? What is going on in there?
But we've talked about doing one again, but this time, for that one, we brought these films we wanted a champion. For this one, we were going to talk about overrated films, which goes back to what AJ was saying. Most of us have one film that everyone else in the world thinks it's amazing, but for some reason it just never gelled with us. And I've talked on the show before about how mine's always Exorcist. People, I know, right? People
all right, you guys can
film.
leave. It's going to get ugly. Just turn your back.
I know everyone loves Exorcist, but for some reason for me, it never materialized. And I mean, I guess I didn't grow up in a religious household, so for me watching it as a kid, I was just like, it's a girl tied to a bed. What, you tied her up? She's not going to do anything now. And so it never hit in my head.
Did you miss the scene after that where her head spun around and she puked vomit all over the priest?
Because
shit happens after the time.
The spider walking down the stairs thing was scary, but that wasn't even in the original cut. So,
but we're hesitant to do an underrated because our show overrated is because we're trying to make a positive show where we're not cutting films to rivers. We're actually championing things and talking about why they're interesting. So if we did overrate it would have to be kind of like still championing. The other people would have to be championing.
I'm going to help you out, Rebekah. I'm going to help you out.
Okay, here we go.
Then everyone's going to get super pissed at me. Mine's Chainsaw.
Really?
Sorry. I make these things so I get to have an opinion. But no, it's the same thing. But I'm not speaking to the thing that's what's important is that, like, you're wrong about The Exorcist and I'm right about Chainsaw. No, but for me, everybody gets to have those things, like for me, by the time I saw Chainsaw, I'd seen a lot of horror movies and I was like, at that age, I reached a point where logic was more important than emotional impact right then. And I watched it and I was like, this movie doesn't happen if those idiots don't go in that fucking house. Leave. And so but really what we're talking about when I say that is I was mad at the characters in the movie and judged the whole film as a result of it because I was like, these guys are idiots. I don't want to watch a movie about these dumbasses. They deserve what they get and the guy in the wheelchair is fucking annoying.
Oh yeah, well that hasn't changed.
True.
But what's great is that it still had that strong response.
Raspberries.
But it had that strong response, and I've watched the movie like 100 times, so I really can't say that like I've watched it 100 times since, but it still was one of those things at the time. I would be really quiet about it for a while, and I'd just be like, no, yeah, Chainsaw. Yeah, it's so amazing. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up how those people just didn't leave, huh?
Well, I want to open it up again because there were a few more hands up there. And also, I want to call out to Anthony Vega right there. Elric used to say in the he's waving right there with the P-Wig shirt. Because early on in our show, Elric would always get like make all these references and stuff. He's like, I know that the one fan in Kansas, or the one listener in Kansas, probably doesn't understand what we're talking about or doesn't care or whatever. And he came up to us last year and was like, I'm from Kansas. I'm your one fan from Kansas. So he's here.
We're speaking to you.
He came to join us.
He's in the audience now. Thank you.
One fan per state. That's still 50 fans. That's good.
That means we're doing good.
My name's Rick. Proud member and worried about his safety. Member of Cronenberg's hernia.
Rick won trivia last
night. He won trivia last night.
So it's kind of gotten ugly because even our Australian friends are like, oh, you're one of those guys.
Yeah.
So, but just going back, even talking about with Texas Chainsaw and what you guys talking about in general. But I think what we miss now in just the handful of movies that we do get is it's that thing that you carry with you afterwards. So I had an example this week of where I work where I let a guy borrow Dead and Buried. Mm-hmm. And the guy's like, wasn't crazy about the movie. It's kind of cheesy. He said, but days after, those things kept coming back, things that I saw that really disturbed me. And I think it's those things we always kind of carried with us, going back to trying to figure out what that movie is. And that's what keeps you going.
Well, it could be partly because horror's a lot of it's generic, but then there'll be a couple subversive things in it. Mm-hmm. So it's a generic story where people are taking photos and people are disappearing. And then you get to the end, and there's weird robot things and corpses. And that part gets under your skin. So you might not have loved the movie, but something in there burrowed in.
Something stays with you.
Yeah.
And you know what else to that I would say in this modern era, when I've even turned my phone over a couple times being here, and it's just weird because I'm happy to be here. I'm still looking at my phone to see that nobody texted me. I highly recommend, if you don't do this, trying one night a week to step away from the computer, turn your phone off, and put on a movie, and just actually in the house, that be the thing that you do. Like, because I can be bad about that. I have the iPad out. It can be something that I'm into. It could be something I've never seen before, and I'll be like, this is really great. Did anybody put a move on Chess with Friends? and it makes us ADD, and it makes it really harder to make that kind of connection. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That thing where you go, well, I don't know if I was into it, but I'm still thinking about it. Mm-hmm. I've started doing that at night. I'll go through Netflix Instant, and I'll pick a movie where it's like, 11 p.m., putting the phone away. I'm making a cup of tea. I'm going to watch this movie, for better, for worse. And I've caught some real turds. But I've also seen some movies that blew my mind. And I think that if we did spent a little bit more time doing that, then we would be helping ourselves foster that conversation.
Because the movies were always bigger than us. We went to movie theaters, the screen's bigger than you physically, and you're not allowed to do anything while you watch it. And so we're all affected by movies. Then one day we have all these other options while we're watching a movie, and a lot of people use them. And that's not the same experience anymore.
I have that problem. I'll end up thinking about watching trailers on iTunes for an hour and a half. I'll start going through them. And then I'll be like, we've got the 5G, so it should be fast. And I'll be like, it's taking so long to load up. When I was the kid that was around before the internet. Dial-up used to take an hour and a half on AOL. And I'm just like, it's 10 seconds. Come on, just play the trailer already. I can't deal with this. And I'll start doing something else, and I'll be like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna let this load up. I'm gonna go smoke a cigarette, and then I'm gonna really enjoy this trailer.
I'll jump on one more, which is what I've been doing, and I've talked about on the show. It's like, don't watch the trailer and see how you feel. I haven't watched. You will not find a bigger Star Wars fan than me of the original Star Wars. I have not watched either trailers yet, and I won't unless I'm in a theater and it plays, and then I'll probably blow.
Let me tell you what happens in it. The way that it starts.
No, because it can really enhance things. They show too much in trailers now, and that the art of cutting a trailer has just changed so radically that they are trying to show you all the money shots. And it's like, try avoiding it, and then see how much it improves the film.
Being in a number of pitch meetings in LA, that is now a common thing that you will hear is there's no trailer moment. I've heard that so many times where they will say, you don't have any trailer moments in here. And that's what they're looking for, is like moments of somebody, saying help me into the camera and then being pulled into darkness just because you put that at the end of a trailer and boom, you've roped in an audience.
That's why Corman was cool. He'd put in like another helicopter explosion. That's not in the movie, but it's in the trailer.
What's the one about the guy getting skinned, and so they made it as part of the trailer?
The Warnowski episode. Go listen to that. That's a good story.
Yeah.
Anyway, more questions.
Anyone else? Oh, right up here.
Russ.
How you guys doing? The Shining has always been a warring debate in my mind.
Yeah.
Because I grew up loving Stephen King. And
He's wearing a
the
Stephen
reason
King
why
shirt, by
I
the
love
way.
Stephen King stuff is because he creates these characters that you love and you care for, and you don't want them to be harmed. And what Kubrick did with The Shining was he took all those elements out, and he just made it a haunted hotel movie where Jack Torrance is this boogeyman, and I was like, this is bullshit.
Right.
But if I don't think about the novel, because I saw the Mick Garris miniseries first, and so in my mind I was already like, oh, so this is The Shining. And then when I saw Kubrick's version, I was like, what? Like Jack Torrance has an axe, and that movie is good, like visually, but as characters that I care about, I don't really take it seriously. Like I think the Kubrick Shining is a comedy.
Yeah, it is.
Like Wendy Torrance just sits there and screams as
Rob
she
loves
goes,
her.
No,
He has a thing for Shining.
no. I just think it's funny how everyone can take something different from a film.
Yeah.
I see it one way, someone else sees it another. And I try to take the King book and take it out of the equation when I watch it. It's hard for me to do. It's like it's like two personalities in my brain. One personality saying, it's a film, you got to disconnect it from the book. The other one's like, this is bullshit. This is the way that it should be written. So, yeah,
And it goes both ways, too, because we're talking about expectations at that point, right? Because when I was a kid, I saw Jaws 100 times. And then when I got to be about 10 years old, I thought, I'm going to read the book. And have any of you guys read the book?
Yeah, I've read the book.
Okay, so I'm really glad that I saw the movie before I read the book, because in the book, sorry for the spoilers, but it came out in the early 70s.
You've had an adequate time to read it.
Is an alcoholic asshole who's bald, super overweight, who hates his wife, who has an affair with Matt Hooper, and Matt Hooper gets actually eaten, and they go out and come back in every day. So they don't go out there for that one trip, like the movie would suggest. And as a result of that, at 10, I was like, this book is dumb as hell. I don't like it. But somebody had to like it because they greenlit the movie. And it's so, for me as a film goer, one of the biggest battles that I wage internally with myself is going, okay, I can't watch a book. And I can't really read a movie. I can read the script, but I can't read a movie. And so that movie is basically someone's interpretation of what they read. So then I go back to, well, did I relate to it? And initially I didn't, and I still don't relate to it, but I can enjoy it. And that's why, it doesn't happen as much now, but when we were younger, all I remember is everyone always saying, oh, the book was better. And what that means is that in the book, we got to create the world in our mind and our imagination instead of watching someone else's imagination unfolding. And so we're predisposed to like ours more.
There's also different ways to be pulled into a movie, and I think what you're saying, like Cujo, does exactly what you're wanting from Stephen King to me. Like as a movie, it succeeds in making us care, and then I'm pulled into the horror because I care about them. With The Shining, all I can describe from my love of that from a very young age, I mean like 10 years old, is like a hook, like Hellraiser. That hook came out of the TV, pierced into me, and then it just pulls me along through the hallways with Danny. Right. And it's like this, it's a really interesting identification POV thing. It's almost like you're projecting onto the blankness of the characters. Right. I agree, they are not emotional. Jack Nicholson's insane by the time he's in the car on the way to the job. Oh, yeah. So you're like, okay, so there's something different, but there's something at work, and I get hassled for saying this on the show, pure cinema.
Oh, God.
But there's nothing closer than that movie. Because it's a movie built on aesthetic, not emotion. And so you're totally right. And yet there's something I cannot look away. And I'm pulled in every frame of that. Except some of the stuff with Scatman where they kind of break. The stuff that actually does have heart actually almost takes me out of the movie.
Watch your mouth.
Oh, see,
because,
I like
no,
those
he's
moments.
amazing. But because those moments are a break from the actual aesthetic ride. So it's weird.
I like those moments because I think they make Danny less insane. Because like Danny, I mean, you're from the beginning, you're seeing him like talk to his finger and everything, and he's definitely not like the strongest character to follow behind. But his discussions with Scatman make him more sincere.
I have a really similar problem with The Shining, which I love. I love The Shining. However, deep down, I do love that book, and I can't. Often, it's like the great cinematic conflict of my life is that little bit of niggling regret. Just imagine if he did do it straight from the book. Because people say that Kubrick is this cold, detached, force. But he's also the guy who made Paths of Glory. There is a humanist in there. And I know that conflict as well, because, and it does exist. But however, it's you do detach yourself from it because it's so much of its own entity, and it drags you in. And I watch it all the time.
But Jaws and Shining are examples of, and it's based on the book, where you'll read about the making of these films. These are not directors who felt like you did. They didn't love the book. They read the book and they go, oh, haunted hotel, boom, I want it.
Yeah,
they buy it,
yeah.
and they don't give a shit about anything else in there. Same with Jaws. They just saw the thing that they could do.
Ooh, there's a shark.
Putting this in sort of a personal perspective. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Russ?
My other problem is that they call it The Shining, yet they only mention the boy's power once in the film, whereas the book actually takes logic from like the force of The Shining. Like, what is this thing? Like, you know what I mean?
It's probably his fear of not wanting to go too supernatural and losing an audience because it gets too, like, you know.
True.
There's
very,
also, I mean, from a filmmaking perspective, it's really hard to show telekinesis or power like that because, like, I'm scanning you. I mean, there's not much that you can do there. So, yeah, from a filmmaking perspective, I can see why they maybe would have shied away from the Shining ability a bit more than say, oh, cool, creepy shit in a hotel.
This obviously isn't the same as Kubrick because Kubrick got to make what Kubrick wanted for a really long time. He would make the thing. But this happens all the time in the film industry. At least I don't know anything about the studio system other than intellectually. Like, I don't have any experience with it. But I do know about genre films in the studio system because I know all the people that they're trying to get to do them. And I will tell you that they tend to go for people, let's be real about it, they tend to go for men that don't give a shit about the series. Like, if it's a franchise, like I made a movie with the guy that's making the next Friday the 13th movie, and he knows that Jason Lives is one of the most important movies of my life to me. And he called me and said, you know, I got a call about Friday the 13th. They're doing a new one. And I was like, if you fuck this up, I'll kill you. And I told him, okay, here's the rules, man. If they tell you any of these things, walk. Like, no found footage, no 3D. Jason's got to be in it. And I was like, if you want to blow their mind, tell them you prefer them with the pillowcase, just to see. And I was like, then they'll think that you really know what you're talking about. And he went in there, I shit you not, and said, I don't really care about this series. I'm not very interested in Jason as a killer. I would like to make a movie more like about the mother, and because Jason's boring. He got the job.
Yeah.
And then I called him, and he told me about this. I was like, if you do any of that shit that you said, I'll kill you. I'll literally kill you. And from there, he was like, but this speaks to usually the person that can go in and say, I'm going to deliver this thing responsibly, that isn't going to be precious, that is willing to kill your darlings. That's who gets the job. Mm-hmm. Now, since then, we've done a whole lot of educating him. And like, he now is like really invested in it. But this ends up happening. Someone that's fairly dispassionate about the source material, if you're talking about source material, is sometimes the best person for it because they're not going to come in it with fan service, which we love as fans, but I don't think that it's the best thing for any movie, because fan service means you end up getting self-referential, and the movie becomes about we're in the same inside joke. But that's not telling a story. That's not serving characters. That's not creating something that's timeless. That's creating something like one of those Zucker Brothers like scary movie things where you're like, that's a funny joke now. In 6 months, I'll have no idea what they're talking about. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I had a question more along the lines of one internet debate about It Follows. Was I had seen someone just posted something that was all hate. It was like, it wasn't I don't like it. It was like you said, it was like, just don't go see it because I'm deciding it's categorically bad. And then I ended up in this sort of discussion with one of my podcast friends from Utah. That's the other thing, a beautiful thing about podcasts, was going from watching these movies alone to like, oh my gosh, like this guy, I heard he liked Night Train Murders, and now we're living together. Crazy.
This can happen to you too.
Love comes to heart, people.
But,
he's a keeper.
Yeah, he's a keeper.
Especially if he's right about the prey.
Yeah, so then the debate with him was, I was like, he didn't like it either, which was fine. And I was like, but isn't this exciting that there's this independent film? And he's like, and he has this independent movie fatigue because there is so much available streaming. Like, you can put up your own movie on Amazon. So, like, how much of a struggle is it for you guys, and just also like production wise, when you're pitching a film, because there's so much available, you don't have to pay for actual film anymore. Like, so how is it, on the one hand, there's, like you said, there's like all these, you see some gems and some turds. So you'll see an Easter Bunny kill, or someone's knocking at the door, and then you see something that was like, oh, I made this in my backyard and I don't even actually like horror. So can you talk maybe a little bit about that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, we are in a ridiculously saturated market right now. More horror films are coming out right now than we've ever seen before, simply because a lot of, and this is a sad thing to say, a lot of the people in Hollywood who are just looking to make a quick buck see horror films as a quick buck. So you see a lot of these formula films, and that's what they are, as formula films, because they are made to a formula of, we see, okay, well, last year there was a big trend of people working with, found footage films. So let's make a found footage film. That seems to be where the market's heading, and we're getting extra points on witches. So if you can put a witch in that, that's cool. And then they will literally formulaically create the box cover too, based on what's trending in Redbox and what's getting good points on Amazon and things like that. So you do see a lot of that. But I love it when the markets are saturated. The market was saturated in the 80s too. And then in the 90s, we got very few and far between horror films. And then it kind of started coming back at the end of the first decade of the 2000s. But when we see saturated markets are when two things happen. It's when we start seeing really savvy filmmakers happen. It's when we start seeing, it's when we start seeing really savvy filmmakers, because they kind of have to push themselves to really get something out more creatively. So like right now, you can't just make a zombie film, because there's 7 other people this week who made a zombie film just this week. I guarantee it. And so you can't just do a standard found footage haunted house movie, because there are so many. So you really have to push yourself creatively as a filmmaker. And I also love it because it creates really savvy viewers. At this point, we have seen so much coming out in the genre market that we're not just going to watch anything. And it really pushes the viewers to be more specific and more refined in their viewing standards of what you're willing to put up with and what you're willing to watch. And at that moment, the cream rises to the top, because you've got smarter filmmakers and smarter viewers. So the saturated market, it's harder to get your stuff seen and to get into it, but it makes a better product. That's why, people look at the 80s as like being this glorious time, or the 50s as being this glorious time. The reason those are glorious times, we had so much product that you really had to go just balls out to get something really well done and that would stand out. And
budgets and imagination in the 80s. Yeah. There's a lot of that too.
Yeah, and I was listening to, on the way here to Texas, I was listening to the F This Movie podcast, which our friend and listener Patrick does, and he was making a very valid point about how if you really look at it, all the best horror movies ever tend to be the most decisive. Like the ones we've mentioned today, it's like either people love them or hate them, and it's more interesting, like, because anybody that loves, like everyone loved, they gave the example, like, oh, everyone pretty much loved Conjuring. I mean, but that's because it's a straightforward, by the numbers kind of poltergeist thing, and it's well made, and everyone's like, yeah, it's pretty good. But nobody's talking about it in the same way as, Babadook and It Follows.
Or
and
even
stuff
Insidious.
Like
I get more excited about a new Insidious film than I do Conjuring, even though Conjuring's like a perfectly crafted movie.
Right.
Insidious showed me something different, and I hadn't quite seen that, and I was like, oh, I'm curious where this is going. Like, they're going into this further. What's going to be the next sequel? A sequel to Conjuring, I'm not going to be excited. I'll enjoy it. But, going somewhere unfamiliar is more exciting to me.
The Evil Dead movie kind of got me excited like that. The Evil Dead remake. Just because that was another one where people were arguing over it, whether or not it's good or bad or has merit. And
I was arguing with Fede about at South by. I don't, as a person that primarily makes them, I don't pitch anymore. And you reached a point, like some of us, we reached a point with around the time You're Next, and when we were making Sacrament, we're like, most of us are ending up at really big agencies like CAA, and now we get to have movie stars in our movies, and it's starting to change. So money starts factoring in. And some of us made the choice right then and there to go, you know what, no, that's not going to, what's going to happen now is we've made enough movies that have made enough of a return financially that as long as I craft a story that we can execute for under $500,000, no one's going to fucking tell us what to make. And so I'd rather do that. Because then you don't really have to pitch, and you don't have to concern yourself with. I've literally never worked on a movie where there's been a conversation about like, what do you think people would like? It's never even remotely considered. I'm sure that it has been for some of the writers at some point where they're like, like I know with Your Next, they were bummed out that everyone was so bummed out about A Horrible Way to Die at Toronto, because we showed it there and people would be quiet about it after it got done. They would just be quietly reflective and they would walk out of the theater. And they wanted to make something, because Insidious played then too. They wanted to make something that got people jazzed, and so Your Next came from that. But other than that, no. I tend to distrust the people that live in the world where they're like, well, this is hot right now, or we should do this. The only thing about that stuff that bothers me with postmodern genre films that we're talking about is that every time one comes out that's competently made now, it's the best horror movie of the century. I've literally heard people say that about It Follows or the Babadook. Yeah, and I'm like, that's counterproductive to the filmmakers, because you're instantly forcing me in this modern social media age to get online and make sure that I assert that I feel differently. Otherwise, you're marginalizing my ability to think. And it's like, fuck you, I don't feel that way. When really it should be like, no, the movie's fine. People think that I'm insulting movies. My personal experience with It Follows was I was like, it's fine.
Yeah, that was fine.
I was like, it's fine. I have problems with the logic. And that's been the whole conversation that Elric and I've always had. But because I said that, that turned into, I hope that everyone that worked on It Follows gets herpes and that nobody watches the movie.
That was what
and I
happened
was
on
like,
our
I
show.
don't feel that way at all. I want it to do well. I want every movie to do well.
If you
except
go
for
back,
Cameron
herpes
films.
cases already.
If you go back to the first episode where I address It Follows, I say, you know what? It had some really good jump scares, but it didn't gel for me. And then by like 3 episodes later, it was like, well, Bekah hated it. So
she didn't even watch it.
I slept the whole time.
It seems to be counterproductive to all of the stuff that we've been talking about, which is fostering that friendship and that community and that conversation. And we do it in every way. When we talk about like being at a convention, when we talk about convention goers and then celebrities and fans. I hate that fucking word. Like, we're at a convention. There's no such thing as fans here. We're all fans. So we're just talking about shit that we're interested in.
There's only one person here signing for free, my friends.
It's AJ Bowen.
Seriously.
Rob will charge you $60. So,
for real.
But to speak to what AJ was talking about, we live in a really great time right now because you can make that choice as a filmmaker to not pitch. And we're seeing, I mean, granted, you may not have quite the budget, but you have control back. And that's what we're seeing a lot of people do, which is how a lot of some of the better films are getting made. I heard somebody refer to pitch meetings as the day you collect water bottles, because you will literally go from office to office, and every single time you walk in, they'll be like, can I get you a bottle of water? And you take it, and then you put it in your car. And so, like, by the end of, like, your day of pitching to people, you'll just have a collection of water bottles in the back. And they are looking for a formula, because you'll walk in and sometimes you will have a marketing person sitting in the meeting with you, and you'll go through your whole razzmatazz of, and there's a vampire and it's steampunk and things explode. And then at the end, somebody will just turn and be like, can we market that? And that's what it ultimately comes down to. So you are seeing a huge, and that's part of the saturation, number of filmmakers who are like, fuck it, I can come up with $30,000 on my own. Yeah. I don't have to put up with this bullshit. Let's just go do it.
I will say that was the we're in the process of making a movie right now, and it was a little unfair for me to say I don't do pitch meetings. We did have a pitch meeting, and the pitch meeting was as follows: we'll make a movie for $50,000. That was literally it. And they're like, cool, we'll give you a check for $50,000. And then we were like, fuck, how the fuck are we supposed to do that? We're all in the union now. This is impossible. But that was it. That was literally it. Yeah, if you give us $50,000, we'll give you a movie.
From like a viewer's perspective, it's like walking into a crowded room and having 100 really nice conversations with people that you don't remember. And then there's that one person that comes up and knees you in the balls. That's kind of what that I want as a viewer. But it's so hard to find now.
Yeah, but the good, I mean,
it'll happen. I'll do it.
Someone will knee you in the balls now. I guarantee.
It was an open invitation. What am I kidding?
I think we're right on our time now, though.
Yeah. And I mean that's kind of the whole point of doing the show and coming out to the conventions and talking to you guys is to find those movies. I mean, yeah, we watch a lot of stuff, but the best stuff. If you come to me and tell me I love this movie passionately, then I'm probably going to check it out. It's going to be at the top of my queue. But anyway,
don't get jaded. Take a break. Like if you get to a point where you think horror films are like bullshit, take a break. Watch a foreign film. Come back to it, and then get your mind blown.
Go watch Roadhouse because it's a perfect movie.
Exactly.
Point
It's a really perfect movie.
I'm in the middle of a Rambo marathon right now.
Yeah.
Like I'm breaking from horror to watch this. But,
Go watch Summer School.
I was doing for a while. I was doing what I would call Furious Nightmare, where I was doing a Fast and the Furious film and then a Nightmare film until I made it through all of them.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Furious Nightmare.
Furious
That's
Nightmare.
cool.
Spin-off.
Yeah, but just stay passionate about what you're into, and everyone up here is passionate about something, and I think you guys are awesome for listening to this. For if you weren't listeners, the fact that you sat in this room for the last hour and a half while there's all this action.
Apologies, because we know that people spent money to be up there, and you just wasted a shitload of it.
Oh, it's not a waste. You refueled us.
Yeah, thank you for being here for the 100th.
We'll see you for 150 next year.
Yeah,
maybe.
come to the Fango booth. We're going to be there all weekend, and AJ's signing for free, and we're more than happy to continue these conversations.
And we're moderating the Phantasm panel in a couple hours. Yeah, come. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, guys. Thanks,
Thank
Aaron,
you.
for being here.